Call to order. Special meeting of the El Segundo City Council. Budget Study Workshop number 2. And if you could please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, roll call. I know Carol's on her way, but we're going to get started.
I'll just mark when she gets here. Councilmember Nickel.
Here.
Councilmember Pimentel.
Here.
Councilmember Brand.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Perstuck. And Mayor Boyles.
Here. Okay, Mr. Carpenter. Oh, do we have any public communications? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Special order of business. Number 1, consideration and possible action regarding a budget study workshop resulting in City Council receiving and filing of staff's discussion, analysis, and recommendations in preparation for the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. Staff will present on the following matters. Public comments. We're going to go into a recap of the last budget session and an overview of the preliminary 2018-2019 budget. Then we will discuss, the council will discuss and provide direction on potential uses of the general fund unallocated fund balance for fiscal year 2018-2019. Any additional priorities and concerns of the council, then we'll wrap and go to next steps. So, City Manager, who's going to lead the discussion?
Yes, Mayor, members of council, we do have some follow-up items from your previous study session, so we'll be reporting on those. We're going to continue the department presentations. We have probably 6 or 7 more presentations to make. Might be a good time for a break after those presentations. We then want to get some direction from council on this menu list of potential uses of the fund balance, which includes the department requests, the capital projects for the year, some recommendations around contributions towards our pension obligation. And certainly this is what staff, the department heads, the CPAC, and myself have been working on for the past couple of months. This is not an exhaustive list, and there may be other priorities that council wants to discuss. This list happens to correspond with our available fund balance, but that's not to say that you need to approve all of these. Our recommendation is that you do move forward with the suggested list, but you do have the flexibility to partially fund or not fund some of these things, or to suggest changes from this. Our goal, as always, is to adopt a budget next month in September. So we do have about a month to continue this conversation. So at that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Lilio, who will get us started with the update recap from the last meeting.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members. To start off, you do have an Exhibit A in your packet. I believe it should be page 3. So this is the city's strategic plan. We did, council and department heads and city manager met on June 13th and participated in a strategic planning workshop to review the prior year's plan and to come up with revisions for the 18-19 plan. On July 17th, the city council reviewed those comments and direction provided by city council from the June 13th meeting, and I got additional direction from city council from the July 17th meeting to make changes to the strategic plan. So that is, I don't know if you've had a chance to review it, but they are noted in red. So any changes is bolded red language. Any language that was completely deleted is stricken out. So you'll see that. If you would like, I can go over what those changes are, or if you've already reviewed it and feel confident I captured the direction from City Council from the July 17th meeting, we won't need to go over it. So I'll leave it up to you, Mayor. What would you like to do?
What do you all think on the council? Have you had an opportunity to review the changes?
Primarily, they had to do with taking activities that were listed as sort of tier 2 or other activities and
Right.
moving into priority 1
Right.
level activity.
And then there was one related to funds, right, Joe? Some reallocation or, hold on. Let me find it.
We did add develop and deliver a multi-year capital improvement plan, which is related to funds.
No, on slide 9, actual requested increase of 241,850. Can you remind us on that one, what that related to? You see that? IS department?
So those are the department, that's more related to the actual budget than the strategic plan document.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, yeah,
Yes.
the strategic plan. Yes, gotcha. Okay,
Yes.
I'm with you. All right. Did everyone review that? I know you sent it to me earlier, Joe.
It
Yeah,
seems,
I can go over the changes, but as Greg mentioned, that it was mainly involving moving priorities that were during that June 13th meeting where council did the dot voting
Yeah.
and did identified tier 1 priorities, tier 2, and other activities. It was more along the lines of moving things from other activities to tier 1,
Lower
tier
to
1 or
higher.
tier 2.
Right. Yeah. Okay, I remember. Is
it's
everyone
pretty
satisfied?
consistent with the notes.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can move on then. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'll bring this back then at some point to formally adopt by the city council.
Okay.
So the next item is the commissions, committees, and boards survey. So I'll refer to it as CCB survey. There was a total of 65 surveys handed out. So they were actually handed out to each CCB member. 39 surveys were returned. Overall, the survey responses aligned with the city's strategic plan. One of the questions was we asked them, CCB members, to rate the goals 1 through 5. And the ratings came back as goal 5 was rated as 90% rated that as very important. And what the categories were very important, somewhat important, of little importance, unimportant, or do not know. So for goal 5, 90% of them rated it as very
And
important.
that's economic development, fiscal sustainability?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, correct. Goal number 4, which is related to technology and infrastructure, that was rated 77% as very important by CCB members. Goal number 2, which is related to public safety, was rated at 70% rated as very important to CCB members. Goal number 3, 53% rated this as very important, and that is related to the workforce.
Employer of choice.
Yes, employer of choice. And then goal number 1 was 51% rated as very important.
Enhance customer service and engagement.
Then there was 2 open-ended questions, if you will. Respondents were asked, what are the greatest challenges facing the city of El Segundo? Top 3 answers were long-term financial health, growing pension liabilities, and economic development. So that all kind of aligned with goal number 5, which aligned with their responses earlier. And the last question was, respondents were asked to list their top priorities. The top themes were economic development, financial health of the city, development east and west of PCH, and addressing city's infrastructure needs. So that was the results of the CCB surveys. Is there any questions at all?
Were you able to actually attend their meetings, Greg? How did you facilitate the surveys?
Yeah, I attended all 10 of the council appointed board and commission meetings, handed out the surveys, and either received the surveys that night or received them through their staff liaisons later.
That's great. Thank you.
And the councils and board members were appreciative that they were asked. We could certainly get further, and we can do this a little earlier in the process, I think, in coming years, but I do think they appreciated the opportunity to weigh in. And the good news here is that there's a lot of alignment between what staff and the council decided on and what the boards and commissioners think are priorities. And for those open-ended questions, primarily the bottom one, where they were asked to rank the priorities for this year's budget, You'll see in the department presentations that there's a lot of alignment around what the department heads are recommending that we address in this year's budget and what the board and commission members feel are important things for us to address this year.
Great.
Okay, you did see this slide in the July meeting, but I do want to update you on this. So on July 17th, I presented there were a total of 34 vacancies. So this is updated. In fact, I got a phone call at 1:30 today by a department head giving me an update. So as of today, there are 39 vacant positions, and again, there were 34 last month. And I have vacancies by department listed there, police being the highest amount of vacancies, and then public works next. I will say that there are a lot of recruitments in the pipeline. So probably the next 2 weeks to 2 months, there will be a lot of onboarding. Typically, though, we do see towards the end of the calendar year a lot of fresh retirements. So we'll probably see some new retirements coming up as well. So for the department head presentations, we're going to start off with Charles, and then there are several departments after.
Thank you, Joe. I believe it is. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. This first slide here is really just a recap of my current open positions. Going back to the first one is the GIS. We basically, that became vacant as a result of retirement. I'm looking to fill that position in first quarter 2019. IS System Specialist, that one's vacant as well. Looking to fill that particular position in Q2 2019. Currently, I'll fill that position with a network analyst. We do not have a network analyst, and we obviously need support on that from a networking perspective. System developer, I hope to say Q3 2019 is to hire someone that's more of a project manager to put some discipline, some additional discipline around our project management process and the many projects that we actually have on the list. And then the last one, I'll talk a little bit more about as we go through the presentation. What I'd like to do is that says GIS intern, but I believe it's an admin intern. So I'm looking to turn that admin intern into a admin specialist, I believe it is. Okay, top button. Okay, to provide a little bit more detail in terms of the administrative specialist, I'm looking to flip that part-time position to a full-time. The net increase to the personnel budget would be $66,290, and obviously that would be an ongoing cost. Okay. Oops, wrong button. Sorry. Okay, this is kind of a recap of the cost that I'm asking for, and I'll give you a further breakdown in a couple slides. But bottom line is what we're looking at is we're looking to add project management services. We're looking to add business analysis for the purpose of, as I mentioned before, to put some structure around the many projects that we're actually moving forward. In addition to that, we need technical support for not only the projects before care and feeding of the existing systems that we work today, and then ultimately enterprise system architecture. Okay. The net impact of the technical and professional services request is the middle line item. The 183 is if we were to actually stay flat. The 241,850, that's the additional request that I'm really asking for today and asking for consideration. Okay, we will use some of the salary savings to ultimately offset some of the ongoing work that we have, as well as to supplement some of the projects where necessary. Okay, this list, you obviously can't read it, but what I did do, can't read the list. You can't read the list there, but Councilmember Pimentel asked me to provide a little bit more clarity and visibility into the actual projects and kind of the breakdown of project management services, business analysis, so forth and so on. The list that you see there before you is kind of an abbreviated list that I go over with the tech committee, and we actually went over that list last night. So it really just kind of recaps all of the projects. It provides, you know, from left to right, it provides a brief description of the actual projects, the original priority of the projects, and then the budget ask for the actual projects, and then ultimately the funding source of those projects. So in summary, I'm asking for approximately $241,850 as it relates to additional professional and technical services, and then I'm asking for $66,290 for turning basically a part-time intern into a permanent position. Okay. I'll be more than happy to entertain any questions if you guys have any.
When you talk about, on your first slide, doing something in Q1, I think you called it 2019, what time is that? What, by months?
I was looking at by December, so October, November, December.
So
Which is
the first quarter is October to December.
Correct.
For the 18-19 budget, right?
Correct.
So you want to get this in place at the beginning of the second quarter?
Well, for the first position, yes, GIS. I currently have a consultant that's currently filling that role that basically supports all of my peers, all of the other departments. What we will do is we will publicly post that position, and may the best person actually get the job. But we do have a couple of leads of people that we probably could fill that position relatively quickly.
And so Q2 on the second one, what months does that cover?
I guess that would be, what, December, January, February? And these are estimates. I obviously have to work with human resources to get these items posted, and hopefully we'll get, hopefully we can beat the bushes and get a lot of people interested in these positions.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So Charles, just for council's information, you've estimated the number of hours per project of the 21 projects, which ones can be done by in-house staff, which ones are going to be done or best done by consultants, and the additional money you're asking for next year for consultant support allows for these 21 projects to be completed next year.
That is correct. And it covers primarily project management and business analysis services.
And if the effect of not approving the consulting dollars that you requested would be having to reset the timeline for
some of the projects,
completing the list,
and or push them out to further years.
So the only headcount change is converting that half-time GIS intern to a full-time admin specialist?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a question about that. So
Sure.
I understand the project management component because, these are some major projects that we want implemented and we need expertise into doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But as adding the additional half an FTE, I'm not sure if we're at the point now where we can really determine what that organization should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not sure if it wouldn't be best just to bring in the consultants, bring these projects on, and then once we get through the majority of these projects and we can assess what type of help you need, that's when it would be a good time to you to come back to us to say, this is what my department should look like as a redesign.
Yeah.
So I'm not really comfortable adding additional headcount at the moment because I'm just not sure. There's so much going on as far as bringing in these project managers, bringing on these new initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
that once these are in place, you really may want to take a whole redesign look at the department,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that would be a good time. I mean, that's just my opinion, but
That's
I don't like to add head because that's a permanent.
Mhm.
I mean, I understand the whole consultant piece to bring on these projects because we're ramping up, and then they'll go away once these are deployed. But adding head count when we already have 3 openings, I have a hard time with that
Mhm.
one.
Yeah, that's a good concern. That particular position, I see as an ongoing position for the department. That position would actually support the department from a contract management standpoint, RFP standpoint, a lot of administrative activities, requisitions, invoice processing, agendas, minutes, some budget prep, budget assistance.
So, I mean, what we really should be looking at citywide, the whole management of the RFP, the invoices, like, are we looking at centralizing some of that initiatives as far as invoicing, RFP management, contract management? I think there could be some streamlining of processes if we centralize some of that functionality. And as we bring on these new, and like, I'm not sure where these new initiatives from an IT initiatives will really change the landscape of how we do business, and it could open up avenues for centralizing some of that functionality. So I'm not really comfortable bringing on an additional head at this juncture. I'm not saying you won't need it in the future. I just, at this juncture, I'm not sure that's, because once we have that head on, we have 39 open head count already. Like, why are we adding an additional half a head when we may be realigning head counts once these initiatives are deployed?
Understood. I would love to have one transferred, but my peers would probably kill me for asking that question.
I mean, but these 21 initiatives, IT initiatives, are really going to change the way we perform at the city. It's, some of these are going to have huge huge changes, and we're just going to be performing better and at a different level. So there could be opportunities to reassess or realign positions, because some of the functionalities that we're going to be doing today manually are going to go away, but we're going to have other higher need tasks that are going to have to be accomplished. So I'm not really comfortable, that's just me, bringing on new headcount when we have 39 open heads and we have all these initiatives. Let's wait to deploy the initiatives and come back, would be my...
To Carol's point, Charles or Joe, do you see an opportunity to centralize procurement, RFPs, that whole thing? It seems like it's pretty siloed right now. IT does their thing, police does theirs, fires does theirs, Rexham Park has their separate RFP process. Do you see an opportunity to do that?
Centralize it and automate it. So right now, a lot of those processes are very manual. Absolutely.
But do you have to have a technology platform in place to make that happen? Is that what you're saying? Or I'm just thinking from a functional role.
There's a technology component into, yes, absolutely. One is getting it from a manual process to an automated process, and then streamlining and centralizing it. It's going to rely on some type of technology platform to do that.
Eden probably has something, right, as a module? Or
yes, and give you an example. One of the projects that Charles' staff is working on right now is automating the requisition PO process. It's very manual, and automating it will probably cut that time by, I would say, 50–60%.
So to Carol's point, I tend to agree. Like, I would like to see how this technology gets implemented and how we need to, because when you implement this many projects, to your point, the future state should look different than the current state, and I think that people's roles will probably shift a bit within the city. Can you get by with a consultant in that role for the time being, just to get through the?
Sure. I mean, I totally support all the project management roles, because definitely that's knowledge that we don't have in-house as far as, because some of these are huge projects.
Yes, they are.
And we want them to be implemented correctly, and and it's going to have a huge impact on the current staff anyway, because there's a lot of processes that are going to have to be reevaluated, the crossover, the retraining. I mean, it's going to be burdensome for everybody, so it's important that we bring that project management team in to help with that implementation. I totally understand that component.
Yeah, I understood. I would probably just continue with some type of consultancy or temp in that role, and then we'll move forward and see what it looks like once we get the projects implemented.
Do we have consensus on that? The rest of the council members okay with that? Okay, great. Thanks, Carol. Great point.
Other questions?
Charles, can I ask just a couple quick questions? This may also be with Greg in mind as well, but some of these things that are sourcing that are ISD projects, but sit across the operating arms of the city. When we fund things from the parking lot fund, Is that competing for dollars with some of our other things that the in lieu parking fund will go to, like Smoky Hollow? If their funding source is a parking lot fund, or if it's from civil asset forfeiture, are we going to be looking at competing assets that are looking at that same pool of money?
Yes, potentially. The way this document has been structured is we identify where general fund dollars are being requested or where other funds are being suggested for use. Use an example, if the fire department is using developer fees for a fire engine purchase, I think your question is, could those developer fees be used for some other purpose in the fire department, like other equipment or facility upgrades? And the answer is yes. There aren't any other projects that the fire department has identified for next year in that example.
If I could add, with respect to the funding of the projects, it's my understanding that those projects are already funded through the capital, and that money is basically sitting for the actual projects. So I don't believe that there will be additional asks for projects based on the 21 items that are on that list.
They're earmarked already.
Mm-hmm.
The additional money you're asking for is just the project management component.
Correct.
Any other questions for Charles? Thanks,
Okay.
Charles.
Thank you,
you.
Charles.
Thanks, Charles.
You got a huge task ahead of you with all these projects.
So the next department up is going to be City Manager's Office, and Barbara Voss has a presentation.
You did ask for additional detail around the proposed communications program, job descriptions. Barbara has spent the last couple of weeks developing a presentation to speak more to the objectives of the program, how it's going to be organized, some of the tools we're going to use, if this is approved, what the plan would be, primarily in the first year to roll this out.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor Boyles, members of council. So what I thought I'd start with, since this is a new initiative for the city to develop sort of a mission.
Left and right, Barbara.
Left and right?
Yes, the right. There you go.
Right, okay. Got it. Okay. So this is our purpose statement. And I'll just read this to kind of set the stage for what we're trying to accomplish. And I promise I won't read every line on every slide, but I think it's worthwhile to read this one. So the goal of the City of El Segundo Communications Program is to improve communications between all key stakeholders in the city and ensure that communications are consistent, proactive, and collaborative. An effective communications program is a fiscally responsible and smart investment in the city's future. Clear, concise, and timely communications improve efficiency, trust, understanding, and engagement among residents, employees, and businesses. So this chart shows all of the stakeholders that I've sort of mentioned in the mission statement. These are all of the important stakeholders that we need to be communicating with on a consistent basis. The center box shows the communications platforms that we're currently using, websites, El Segundo TV, social media, advertising, public relations, newsletters, media coverage, events, community meetings, Nixle and Everbridge. So we want to make sure that we are coordinating these communications, that we have a consistent voice, that they're timely, proactive, and that there is a central coordination point for all of these efforts. So how do these things align with the strategic plan? I think communication hits every aspect of the strategic plan. First goal, enhance customer service and engagement. We'll improve our customers, the residents, the businesses, citizens of El Segundo. The residents will be better informed. They'll understand policy. They'll understand activities that are going on in the city. Improve how businesses interact with the city, whether it be going to the planning counter or trying to get a business license. I think communication can improve that interaction. Consistent and proactive information, then also feedback gathering. So it won't be one-way communication going out from the city to the stakeholders. It'll be asking for information, surveying, getting feedback on different things. Support community safety and preparedness. I think working with our emergency management coordinator to develop communication initiatives to prepare residents and businesses in the case of an emergency. so that the what to do question is answered in a before needed manner, so that if there is an emergency, people will know what to do. If in fact something happens, part of the communication is making sure that those who don't know what to do are informed quickly and accurately. And then also coordinating with the media and making sure that we have the right person talking to the media who has the right facts in front of them, so that that effort can be consistent and coordinated. Develop as a choice employer and workforce. Employee engagement, people want to know what's going on. They want to feel included and involved. We want to know what other people are doing well. We want to commend people on what they're doing well, highlight successes, increase interdepartmental collaboration, streamline efforts, avoid duplicative efforts, and guide content. So if, you mentioned the silo, if one department's doing something, another department is doing something very similar, the goal of the communication program will be to streamline it so that those things that are happening in two places at once are happening only once in the central location. And the interdepartmental is so important in terms of still continuing on with the communication that departments are doing, but working collaboratively on consistent messaging and things like that. Develop quality infrastructure and technology. So really, this isn't about the IT side of it, but it's about the human meeting the IT, and what the experience is of someone who goes to our website, who wants to interact with the city through our technology platforms. How will that experience be? We'll use analytics and monitor and track performance, tweak things if needed, if the performance isn't optimal, and really make that a positive experience where people can go to our website and say, yeah, our website is great, it's easy to find things, easy to know where to go, and just have those questions answered. Champion economic development and fiscal sustainability. That I've been working on for a while. Marketing, public relations, advertising, brand and image enhancement all tie into economic development. Business retention, outreach, forums and events. I think we can put more focus on these types of things with additional resources. Targeted business attraction, targeted because we're looking at certain industries, probably prioritizing over others. And then business-to-business communications. All right, so the process. So I see step 1 and 2 on the left there happening concurrently. 1 is develop a citywide communications plan. Seems kind of obvious. That, I've talked to Phelps about doing that. It's a 3-month process, so October to December 2018. Would want them to get started right away. And I'll go into the details of what that would include. And then at the same time, recruit and hire communications and economic development staff. Typically takes 4 to 6 months to hire, so I have October to March for that process. In the meantime, we will be launching 2 new websites in a few weeks, elsegundobusiness.com, destinationelsegundo.com. September is the goal for that. And then we're going to be launching a digital advertising campaign in October, if approved. And then we will be launching the new citywide website scheduled for August and September, again, if approved. And then we'll move full steam ahead. We'll have all the tools in place to communications program implementation. Quickly through this, what will the communications planning process entail? Uncover current communication gaps and pain points, understand current and preferred communication vehicles, and then build a plan, build a strategic communications plan. So the discovery process, surveying, talk to all those stakeholders that I showed on that second slide, focused interviews, sit-down session with each department head, with each member of city council, research best practices in city communications programs, but also best practices in other industries, and really looking at the best in class in communications. And then audit and analyze our current communications vehicles. Develop the plan, present findings to city council. What did we learn? What are we doing well? What needs improvement? What are the recommendations? And then the tool will be this communications plan. It'll be a written document with communications flow chart. They'll give some examples of priority messaging for key situations, a media policy, a style guide, brand consistency will all be included in that plan. So the people. So adding or upgrading a position to Deputy City Manager, that position would oversee citywide communications and economic development programs, work with City Council and department heads to develop strategic communications initiatives. And I won't go through all of these. There'll be a detailed job description. These are just some of the highlights here. Second position, communications management analyst. This would be a new position. This person would work collaboratively with all the departments. They would probably lead an interdepartmental communications team. They would help with copywriting, but there'll be copywriters in each department who have the expertise in their fields. Post content, proofread, make updates to the website and monitor the websites. They would be the ones running the Google Analytics and looking at the performance of the websites. They'd be looking at the performance of our social media, opportunities for improving our social media presence. They'd be analyzing our digital advertising campaign and making recommendations on that. They'd handle all press releases. They'd handle speech writing. They would do some design. This is my wish list. They would do some design. They would arrange interviews. They'd have the ability to source stories, talk to departments, talk to businesses, residents, and come up with a compelling narrative around different things that are happening in the community. And then our economic development coordinator. This person would help with business retention, recruitment, work with the real estate community. One of the really great aspects of our new website is going to be this listing of available properties. It's a very common question in economic development when people are between engaging a broker and just kind of looking around to see what's available in a particular area. This website will have the available properties listed and then links out to the web pages, the brokers, or different next steps after the basic information about the property is given. And this economic development coordinator would manage that. Schedule and coordinate business visits. We need more outreach to businesses, more visits, more events, working with different, like the mayor's business roundtable, getting businesses engaged with the city.
So the previous slide showed how we're really focusing on two of those significant strategic planning goals that we have: economic development and improved communications. So there is a cost, and it starts with a plan. We believe that because of the time it's going to take us to bring those two full-time positions on board, if they're approved, we can use those savings to fund the initial plan effort, which is estimated to be about $75,000, to develop the communications plan, do the research and develop the plan, as Barbara discussed. We would be upgrading the economic development management position to a deputy city manager. That would be not another step in the city's organization chart of reporting responsibility, but somebody that would be a new member of the executive team, would be attending those executive team meetings, would be attending council meetings in addition to EDAC, and would be compensated at the level of the executive team. The two new positions, fully loaded costs, salary and benefits. The communications management analyst is seen as more of a early to mid-career professional position, and the economic development coordinator is more of an entry-level position in economic development. The total cost of what we're proposing is going to depend on the range that we bring these people in. There's 5 steps in our salary structure. Depending on the range that we bring them in, the estimated cost is $230,000 to $280,000.
Do you also, I know it sounds like that department will be a gatekeeper of sorts too for inbound and outbound communications, because one of the concerns I have and I've expressed before is the way in which we survey.
Right.
It's often, I think we put our best foot forward, but not often statistically significant. I mean, our methodology, I think, sometimes is a little bit lacking. I know we're trying to be quick and responsive. So as part of this, if we go forward with this, I would love to see a more coordinated effort. And I know, Charles, we looked at some technology out of Israel that's kind of more qualitative based and using artificial intelligence to get some themes going. But I would like to see us take on the way we survey our folks, because I think right now it's not great. That's the first thing. Second is, are we sure Phelps is the right firm to develop the communications plan? I only ask because, you know, I don't know if they've done that before, if it's a city-specific, internal, mostly internal, there's external components as well, but you don't have to ask the question. It's more rhetorical.
Okay.
So my comment is the timing of this is important because we are in the process of developing our new website.
Yes.
And with that website really comes that CMS system, the Customer Communications Management System. And a lot of these items on the job description would really be housed in that communications management system, and we really need an owner of that system at the beginning of the design of that system. My one thing is that I know that there's a lot of functionality. It goes back to my previous comment about centralization. You know, as we, and if we do move forward with this, there's a lot of functionality that's going to have to come from other departments into this department, and those departments are going to have to give those components up, like we were talking about graphic design, you know, anything that we can centralize, and so those departments then will have to, as we add these two heads, it's going to free up time in those other departments, and I would hope for those other departments to realign their head count in accordance to the shift of responsibilities.
Well, and to that point, I think the mayor made the point at the previous meeting. There are some functions that Phelps is performing for us now that these individuals can take over time.
To Carol's point, do we have a sense of how much time on an FTE basis is spent on communications? I know police has a PIO, fire does some stuff, Rexham Park does communication. Like, if we aggregated all that time, is it 2, 3, 4 FTEs in one? I mean, do we have a sense of that?
You know, if I just had to guess at it, I'd say 1.5. 'Cause Mickey in my office is doing some of this as well right now.
Lieutenant
It
Kim,
truly is
right.
decentralized.
Yeah. Okay, I think I think Carol's onto something. We should look at if we are truly replacing some of this functionality within departments and bringing it centrally, how do we redeploy those folks into other responsibilities? Right?
Yeah, because it's too easy to lose one. You know, I've seen so many times where responsibilities are taken from the department, and basically, if you don't actually consciously go in and redesign those departments or reassign, they just, the time that they just kind of spread out, and all of a sudden those responsibilities are gone, but they're still taking the same amount of time to do less work. You know, it's, unless we go into it consciously and really make us say, okay, you're losing 50% of this job, you're going to pick up this, another 20% here, 10% of this. And that's one of the things I talked to Greg about. You know, I was reviewing the job description for these new positions, and one of the things that's missing on all of our job descriptions is allocation of time. So when you go through a job description, you should really be saying 20% of your time is on this, 2% of your time is on that, 5%, so that when you do move and shift responsibilities, you then have a way to equate that, and you're saying that and qualify it. So that's, and once we get the new HR director, hopefully we can go through all the job descriptions and allocate time to each functionality.
Thank you. Chris, did you have a point on it?
I mean, somewhat similar and might be a slightly more aggressive direction is if we are consolidating a communications aspect that already lives throughout the city in other functions and siloed functions, is there a possibility that we already have this person on staff? Is it a reallocation of a current asset that's already doing one of these things, or is it a specific distinct skill set? I mean, the reason I lend to say that is because if economic development coordinator is, and we're parlaying it as a significantly reimbursed entry-level position, because that's a pretty good entry-level job to get, is there a chance that someone would want to promote into that from one of the other sections that we have if we're consolidating some of those communication responsibilities? Maybe the things can be allocated around slightly differently. But I think that's HR is a specific career path for a reason, and I'm not in it. So I think there is an argument to be had on Carol's behalf there.
I think it's a really, my sense would be a very attractive position if I'm in another, no offense to the other departments, but economic development is kind of fun, and it's an attractive role. So, I think maybe there is that opportunity. And it seems to me to be highly compensated. That's entry level. Is that the first step, or is that?
So it's total compensation, and Joe could speak more to this,
So
but
it's
the
got-
actual salary is shockingly less than that.
Define benefit, everything in there.
Yeah,
work, payroll,
everything,
tax,
yeah,
workers' comp. Fully
Exactly. I
loaded.
was surprised
Correct, fully
myself when I
loaded.
saw that. Yeah.
Do you think Don's?
So months back, we were looking for recruiting a library director. And we had a conversation about whether or not we should change the duties of that position as we selected somebody new. And I recall we suggested that we could add to the job description cable television, arts and cultural committee, and communications for the city. So of those three things, is the arts and cultural committee the only one that's actually happened and taken place?
Yes, sir.
And what happened to the rest of the plan?
In my estimation, the role of citywide communications, and we can disagree, but I believe belongs in City Hall under the city manager. And the library director, while quite capable and competent, is focused on the library, focused on that role, and is not in City Hall on a daily basis.
But we did add that to the search. The searcher was told, find somebody with these other skills also, and then we didn't follow through. So now we have this solution instead, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I do, it just dawned on me that library probably does their own communication as well.
Yes.
I know they do, in fact. But also, I do agree that this role should have a seat at the table. If you truly want this person to be the gatekeeper of all things communication-wise, then they should know what's going on within every department at your weekly staff meetings, et cetera. So I think that part is critical.
And then I believe there's discussion about maybe moving the TV, Elscano TV, under this umbrella, correct?
Correct.
So we talk a lot about metrics, especially in your department.
Yes.
And we have a couple that we typically point to: vacancy rates, dollars per square foot,
Mm-hmm.
head count, those kinds of things in town. Do you have a sense of 6 months after we implement this, how are we going to measure the lift, the impact? Because I've said this before, to me, this is the one department. I mean, some departments have components of this, but this entire department has the ability to affect our revenue. Knowing that 95% plus of our city's revenue is commercially driven, this is a high return department. But I want to make sure that we actually measure the lift going forward. We
Right.
pick the key metrics that we think are realistic in terms of our ability to move them. Like, are
Mhm.
we really affecting the vacancy rate as an example? What are those metrics that we're going to use for your department, so that 6 months and a year in, we can say, we can justify this $250,000 increased expenditure.
Right. So in economic development, we're looking at the tax revenue. So we're looking at TOT revenue increase with the onset of our hospitality and tourism effort. We're looking at business tax revenue, and we're looking at sales tax revenue and measuring that over time. Metrics will be increased as we have someone who is doing the Google Analytics reports. So anything that's digital, website related, we can measure. We can start with a survey across multiple stakeholder groups, and then do another survey in 6 months and compare results to see if there's improvement there. So there will be some very solid metrics that come out of it.
And these lagging indicators, which I think are all good, are these going to be relative to the region? So, because things are cyclical and...
Yeah. Well, that's another interesting conversation about, measuring the economy and taking credit, which isn't what we
Right.
do in terms of business tax and things like that. I mean, the economy does impact. Things go up and things go down. But we will compare it LA County-wide. We can do statewide comparisons. We also look at number of new businesses that come into town and the employee count.
Right.
And those impact the tax, obviously.
Right. Okay. So we're going to be looking at the leading indicators. And Are we
Mhm.
going to revisit all those, or do you feel like you already have a good list of what those leading and lagging indicators should be?
I think part of this communications plan will include some metrics because I've I think I'm very comfortable with what we have for economic development, but for citywide communications and certain stakeholders that I haven't touched previously, we'd want to look at how to measure that.
Yeah, because what we hear from our constituents, particularly on the resident side, is we're not informed. And we
Yeah.
know that we're putting information out in various mediums, but that doesn't matter. What matters is, do people get information when they need it, on demand, readily available? Are we responding to them? So we have to have some metrics related to that, the extent to which the public is or feels informed, and feels like there's a convenient way to have a dialogue with us outside of
Yes.
just going to ESPN on Facebook and calling us out. There should be other ways for people to do that.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely. I agree.
So, as part of the communication plan, could we ask to, since we're going to be going and we're going to be evaluating communication throughout the city and where communication comes from,
Yes.
could a component of that be identifying how much FTEs in each department are responsible for communication, so that when this communication plan is done and we go to implementation, we can say, okay, well, Parks and Recs, you had one full FTE on communication. What are you going to, now what are you going to repurpose that person? Library, you had a half a person. Like, I really want to make sure we don't lose sight of taking responsibilities away and people's just spread out their responsibility to fill up their full day. We really need to be cognizant of, we are streamlining this and centralizing it for a reason, and that means those responsibilities, once they're taken from those other departments, that time isn't just, absorbed. Right. So I mean, we really should be seeing, especially given that we have 39 open head count, I'm sure that there can be some repurposing in each of the departments. And maybe a department once in a while will come up to us and say, hey, with all these new initiatives, the IT initiatives, the re-centralization of communication, the centralization of purchasing, the centralization of RFPs, we actually would like to downsize. So, I mean, that would be the best case scenario.
We can ask those questions. I would just remind council, though, that we really envision this as a collaborative team effort, that the communications division will be reviewing, putting out, and increasing the level and quality of the communications we're doing, but they're not going to write an article about a new piece of fire equipment. There's still going to be a content expert in each department that's going to be helping develop that content for the communications. But to the extent that we can help get it out, yes, there'll be some time savings there.
But I thought I heard her say that she's going to have copywriters on staff, or at least one. So maybe they are. Maybe that's a quick interview. Tell us about the fire engine that you're bringing on board. Boom. Tell us about the deployment that we just helped out in Mendocino and that all our officers are safe. Boom. Like, quick interview. Someone else writes the content. I think we'd be remiss not to audit what our current communication policies, practices, and resources are throughout the entire organization, because if I'm writing a communication plan, I need to understand how people are currently spending their time anyway and how we're going to redeploy that activity to a new centralized function. So absolutely concur that we ought to look at that as part of this process.
So that is part of the discovery process,
Great.
to talk to each department head and also to talk to staff about what are you doing in communications, what's going well, where are the gaps where you would like to communicate more, you'd like to have more information available, but you don't have the time or the bandwidth to get that done, and assessing all of that, and then making a determination based on that information.
So
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, Carol, maybe the ask is once you've done the full-blown assessment through discovery process, you come back to council and present your findings.
Right.
Yes, and that's in the proposal
Okay.
too, that we'll have a presentation to City Council and a presentation to all department heads to make sure that
Right.
we're all aligned.
Scott, you've been pretty quiet.
Just thought I'd listen today.
Oh, okay.
No, obviously it's a need. It's the technology vision workshop we did last week. The end product of that was more about people and process than it was about technology. It was about using existing technologies to just do what we want to do better and to achieve our 5 goals. So clearly this is something that we could all make an argument is needed to achieve the goals that we have set out. I think it's just a matter of us deciding, because we can't say yes to everything, so we just have to figure out what we want to say yes to and which prioritizes over the other. And I would love it if, I guess this is an ask. It's like in a perfect
Yes.
world, council people, this is what I would like. And what I would also like to see is like the next slide, which is, but if you can't give me this, I'd love to have this. And could you see yourself accomplishing some of our goals with
Yeah.
one of those two humans?
Tough. So that would be difficult. I mean,
But I mean, it's if we're taking baby steps, there's nothing
Yeah.
that cities don't take leaps. We don't jump, right? I mean, it's designed in
leaps.
that way.
Okay.
But I'm just, because you put two new
Yeah.
people in there immediately, and if, like Drew said, if we don't have all of our processes in place, you're gonna have two people kind of twiddling their thumbs, like, all right, so what are we doing? How are we doing this? Where are we going? Whereas if we know
Yeah.
exactly where we want to go, and that process is identified and done, we bring those people on, and now they're actually working, churning through content. I mean, small business owner.
Yeah.
I mean, we all are in some ways our own information officer, and we decide what goes out, when it goes out. We create content within our businesses, so on and so forth. And so it's not
Yeah.
complete brain. It's for the three. I guess for
Right.
us, we understand that it's like this is achievable. I just don't know if it's necessary to be achieved by 280,000 of net impact per year forever, because as much as it's really exciting and economic development is super important, my other fear on the backside of that is as soon as we hit a recession, which a recession is just 2 quarters of negative growth, as soon as we hit a recession, and then whether it's this council or a future council, and we're like, well, where can we trim fat, right? Well, if there's no economic development to be done, then are the new positions going to be the first 2 to go?
Last in,
I don't
first
know.
out.
I feel like we're Joe likes to show us
Yeah.
that slide with those 2 intersecting lines. Scared us all into thinking what's going to happen in 2020. So I don't know. If there was an option, if we said,
Yeah.
hey Barbara, we can't give you everything, could you do similar to this with less?
So I can speak to what my experience has been over the last 3 years. Being the economic development manager, that has been more than full-time job. I have someone on staff as an intern now who's been helping out basically full-time, and she doesn't have any downtime. She's very busy. So there's a lot to do, and I think I could put 2 full-time people to work tomorrow and have them be very busy with a lot of stuff to do. As far as developing the communications plan and then hiring someone, I would just say keep in mind the 4 to 6 months that it takes to find someone, and you're going to invest quite a lot of money into a website. You want to make sure that you have that person in place to monitor that content and make sure that website's running perfectly. Best technology in a website isn't going to help, and the best design isn't going to help if it's not addressing the needs of the end user, and the user experience isn't positive. So I'd be just concerned about that.
Maybe there's an opportunity to use one of these in a consulting capacity, see how they do in terms of fit within the organization, and before we commit to the full-time hire. I know we've done that in the past.
That is an option. I would suggest that we get through the other 6 department presentations. You're going to have lots of
No, but it's good. She's up here. I think
Yeah.
there's certainly questions in the council. I had similar thoughts. I mean, we're going to have to make a collective decision anyway, right? Thank
Right,
you.
and I'm sure some of these things are going to stand out more than others in council's mind as priorities. But based on the level of discussion and the direction that I heard council giving me as far as drastically increasing and improving on the communications activity and function of the city, this is the recommended solution.
Yeah, and goal 5, economic development, most important with the CCB members. I was actually surprised by that. I figured it'd be safety, but.
And then also the Economic Development Coordinator was a request also made by the Economic Development Advisory Council, and their work plan and the work that they see as important for economic development, and they identified that there is need for an additional staff person. We are also going to come back with a proposal from Phelps for the hospitality and tourism and new business attraction marketing, And you'll see in that proposal, we're going to present at the September 4th council meeting, you'll see in that proposal what items that Phelps would be currently doing, dropping off as this new person comes online and is able to handle that work.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Any other
Thank you.
questions for Barbara? Thanks, Barbara.
So our fire department is next.
Is it time for a break? No, I'm just kidding. We did that to you last time, Chief. It's a joke. It's a joke. Sorry. Bad joke.
Hurt my feelings. Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. When we talked at the strategic planning meeting several months ago, the discussion, the topic that I provided was sharpening the saw, and our budget follows that theme. What we are requesting above and beyond our operating budget that we working with finance and public works is to initiate a fire department accreditation program. That is a $106,000 ask. That's a year one heavy lift startup in year one. It's a 3 to 5 year program, substantial reduction in year two and beyond, down to about 20,000 or less in the subsequent years. In the year one, it includes a majority of that is technical consulting fees, some training, and some agency fees to pay to the company that does the accreditation process. We're also asking for the fire prevention division to have laser fish of all of our existing files. We have in our headquarter lobby incredible cabinets filled with paper documents, and we'd like to digitalize those. A wellness program enhancement. Last year, with your support, we initiated a wellness program for the fire department. We're finding some benefit to that. We would like to enhance that and enter into an agreement with Exos. This is the group that is embedded with UCLA Health at the Lakers facility that will provide a whole range of wellness options. The idea there, I've used the analogy of professional athletes maintain their health and well-being, and when they're injured, you put a lot of effort into getting them back onto the hardwood floor. I'd like to do the same thing with our firefighters. It would hopefully reduce our work comp exposure, keep our folks healthy and able to provide service to our community. And then the last request on a budget enhancement is a contract plan checker for $19,000, and this is just a opportunity to have an outside consultant to assist us with plan checking fees as we see the increase in community development take place. From a capital equipment, we are asking for support to replace a fire engine. This replaces a 1993 engine that's been in service for 25 years. Our recommended practice is 20 years. That's 10 years of frontline and 10 years of reserve service. So this would be a fully loaded, fully equipped fire pumper. A REMS vehicle, this is a specialized unit that would go out on brush fires and provide rescue operations to firefighters. This unit replaces a 1998 pickup truck. It's a specialized piece of equipment. This unit, it's worth saying, when it's deployed, there is money for reimbursement from the state that reimburses our staff time 100%, and we get reimbursement from the state for the use of the vehicle. We have a need on our truck company that is a specialized equipment for technical operations, rescue airbags, and a vehicle stabilization struts. And we have a self-contained breathing apparatus. That's the device that the firefighters wear when they go into incidences in which there's smoke and toxic substances. We are in the final years of the service life of our SCBAs, and we are seeing a need for some equipment parts that will carry us another 2 years before we need to replace the entire fleet. And we do have monies set aside for that replacement in our equipment replacement. So this is a bridge, if you will, to the end of the service life of that apparatus.
Chief, the lead time on the fire engine?
Thank you. If we were to purchase it, put the request in today, it's about a 12-month lead time. So we won't actually see the apparatus in service until calendar year 2019.
And did we have another use for the pickup truck? Is
This pickup truck would be primarily for REMS use.
No, the one that's replacing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we will find our Parks and Recs department will find a use for it. So we won't surplus that piece of equipment. We'll push it over to Parks and Rec, and they found it suitable for their use. The next slide.
Question?
yeah.
Questions as you go? Or?
Oh, yes, sir.
So on your Laserfish
Yes, sir.
project there, is that where a firm would come in and physically do the work to put them on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, your own staff doesn't have to do that.
Correct.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
And then just real quick, on the IT initiative, we have the Laserfish is one of the second project on here. Is that the same or is that additive?
I think that the process is the same. This would be independent of that IT request.
Do we need it to be, do they need to be separate, or are we, I don't want two initiatives doing the same thing, like.
I think it's using the same software and programming. It's additional labor costs, right?
Yeah.
So
This
it's
is-
the labor, so the IT initiative is to the implementation of the system, and then the request here is to do the scanning of the documents, is that what's happening?
It's the IT request is a combination of two, but it did not include fire. So this.
So
would be-
we left fire
so-
out, we
yes, so
we
this would
didn't
be
bring him
added
to the table when
fire.
we did the initial,
That is correct.
okay. Sorry, fire.
There's a
So
common theme
realistically-
of.
So would it not be better to enhance this IT initiative to be to encompass fire, so it's comprehensive citywide, or rather than do a separate contract? Like
Yes, ma'am, we can
when
do
you
that.
get you get better pricing?
I'm not sure if we get better pricing necessarily, but we can certainly put this under the umbrella of the IT project.
I mean, wouldn't it be
I-
better? I mean, it just seems like more streamlined.
Can I ask a
to-
silly question?
Yes, sir.
These filing cabinets that are there, the documents that are inside, how often are they accessed?
That's a great question. We get public records requests that come in, a dozen or so a month that we have to go through the file cabinets and access them.
But a lot of it's, you have to have it for legal reasons.
Well, no, you have to
Right.
have them for legal reasons. I'm just, if there's
Yeah.
anything that can be kicked down the road, if we get into that part
Yes,
of
sir.
this discussion when we say
Yeah.
if that, this or that, then
Yeah.
if all of those documents sat in those filing cabinets for another couple years, we would be okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, just making sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
The fire engine we're looking to replace, it is on reserve right now?
Yes, sir. It's a reserve apparatus.
And what's the vintage of our oldest one that's active?
That's it. It's a 25-year-old fire
No, but
engine.
is the one, it sits in reserve, the ones that what our front line,
Our oldest front
yeah,
line?
our oldest front line that it,
Okay. Bear with me a minute, please. Oldest front line is a 2007.
and do we know what the maintenance allocation is? This thing, is it down? Do we know what the frequency of its deadline status is, or?
It's pretty typical. We do a good job of PMs are called periodic maintenance. So we do monthly holistic checks. Actually, they go through a daily check every day. The engineer goes through a routine and checks the apparatus. They do weekly, which is a little bit more rigorous, and then a monthly. And then we work with our public works shop, and they go through every 6 months a pretty holistic maintenance process from soup to nuts. That money expended is actually good money. We find wear and tear on the apparatus. We're able to make quick changes and repairs to the apparatus, and it's an effective use of our staff time and money.
Is that it, Chris? That one?
Sort of equivalent question, and it's incredibly ill-timed given that we have all these fires going on. But when we send in a strike team, it's fully reimbursed by the state. Is that a revenue generating for us, or do we just net that to zero?
It's a revenue generator.
Chief, remind me, the equipment replacement funds, are those dedicated specifically to fire only, or are they broader than that? I can't recall.
They're broader than just fire.
Okay, so they could be used for any equipment within the city, more or less.
They can, although the money is scheduled specifically to equipment. But if we were in a bind and needed to use money from one department for another, we could make that decision.
Can you define equipment for me? Is that an accounting definition of equipment, or what's the definition there?
So I believe it was last year or 2 years ago, I don't recall now, but we actually did a whole cleanup of the equipment replacement list. We eliminated about 20% of the items on there. It set a threshold of anything 5,000 and above. So that's the threshold to get on the equipment.
Is technology a capital expense?
Yes,
included on that
technology is
list?
on there as well. A new ERP system is not on there, but besides that, there are a lot of technology items on there.
So like servers.
Yes, a lot of the items that are behind the scenes for IS are on there. And each equipment is specifically identified with a depreciation. So I believe, Chris, you said 20 years for a fire truck.
Correct.
So here, in this case, let's use this as an example, 800,000 for a fire truck. That would be depreciated over 20 years. And I don't know, what is that? 50,000 a year approximately, or 40,000 a year, would be set aside and into that equipment replacement fund till year 20. Then you have the 800,000, or we could add some type of COLA increase that, inflation is going to increase it to 900,000, and we would depreciate 900,000 over 20 years.
So the expectation, internal policy is loan to that department for the equipment they buy the purchase, they pay it back.
It's more of a reserve.
Okay.
Yeah, so we actually move those funds into the equipment replacement fund, which has its own fund, and that reserve builds up.
And we created this, honestly, I think we created this issue ourselves back in 2008. The ladder truck needed to be replaced. It wasn't fully funded in equipment replacement. We took money from the fire engines, I think, to put towards the ladder truck, which we did replace for $1.2 million. And during the recession, there were a couple of years where we didn't fully fund the equipment replacement fund. So we dug ourselves into a hole. This is probably the second most expensive piece of equipment in the city behind the ladder truck. So it's sort of magnified here with respect to the fire engine.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth noting that working with Finance and Public Works, we've identified on my schedule a 15-year depreciation look ahead, and monies are set aside each year. So this particular purchase will put us, in terms of large rolling stock, would put us in a favorable position. The next time we need to make a purchase will be a decade from now.
Mm. And how much is in the equipment replacement fund now?
It's about 10 or 11 million dollars, but $5 million of it is owed to us by the golf course fund. So about $6 million in cash.
Right. Yeah, it's about 11.5 million.
So we're never getting that. I mean, how do we get that back?
Well, we hope to.
So they would pay that. Any proceeds
yeah.
from the new, whatever the new
Right.
development is, would pay that back.
That's correct.
So we're at about 5 right now. Is that what you said? In there?
As far as reserve,
Yeah. What's
The
in the
cash.
account?
the
Yeah.
cash reserve is about 6 to 6.2.
And then what would we do with the old fire truck?
The old fire truck goes into surplus, so we work through the shops and they surplus the equipment.
So we could sell pieces off.
Yes.
And historically, I don't know if there's the need, but historically we've had conversations with Guaymas about some of this equipment.
And then as far as the wellness program, you may want to talk to Meredith. She's launching a new wellness program for her, the pool. So we can basically definitely use the pool for some of that wellness program too.
Thank you.
Okay. You have another slide, right?
Yes, sir.
Or is it-
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
So from the personnel perspective, we have a couple of vacancies. One of them is the administrative specialist position. This is assigned to the front office and fire administration. This is vacated due to a resignation that took place a month and a half ago. We also, with the use of a new program through the CUPA program, which is our hazardous materials, the state implemented new mandates on refineries, and the mandates came through the fire department. So this is a new position. It is a management analyst spot that will support our environmental management safety position. This is fully, monies that will be captured from an assessment to the refinery, to Chevron. So this is a fully supported fee, no charge or impact to the general fund. And we currently have, and both of these positions are open for recruitment right now. We also have several firefighter paramedic positions through attrition.
When you say fully supported, that means that we're gonna get fees and charges that not only pay for today's salary but also pension down the road.
Correct. So the position, in fact, we've already received the money from Chevron. We billed in advance. We received monies from Chevron that would fully pay the salary, benefits, and it's zero impact to the general fund.
So really, it's actually a net positive initially.
We're getting the necessary work. The reality, though, is the state, through this initiative, it's called Program 4, in the refinery, it's created a tremendous amount of workload for us. So this position helps support the work demand that will be required from Program 4. Our inspectors will be on site at the refinery much more now. So it takes away from office work, and quite frankly, I think it's a good use of our staff time. We'll have a management analyst in the office that can help and support as the inspectors are out doing the inspection work, where it's probably the best use of their time.
Outstanding.
Okay, any further questions from Chief Donovan? Thank you. I think there's a request to have a short break now instead of waiting until everything is done. So it's 3:48. Let's say it was. What do you think? 7 minutes?
5 minutes.
3:55. Please.
right, Melissa, you're up.
I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
Hello.
So good afternoon. I'd like to start with just a quick reminder that the library does have significant plans for the next fiscal year, including a remodel and technology upgrades and expanded programming for kids, teens, and adults. But the good news is that no additional budget is needed at this time to move forward with those projects. I do anticipate that we'll have much more to talk about at the budget study sessions next year after additional data gathering and analysis. There is one item that we do need your help with this year, though, which is a clarification of part-time headcount, as there has been a discrepancy in the organizational chart and personnel summary from the last few years. An additional allocation of $18,100 for part-time salaries would solve the problem. So the $18,000 would allow us to continue staffing the main library, the school libraries, and the after-school program at the same levels that we do now. Last year, we had 8 full-time equivalent on the organizational chart, but only 5.85 on the personnel summary in the budget. And if you look at the slide, in reality, we do staff it at a 7.41 level. You can see how that's divided by location and by position. And also as a reminder, the El Segundo Unified School District and the Road Nonprofit Organization reimburse the city for part-time salaries at the school libraries. So those reimbursements are up to approximately $135,000 a year, and they are projected to continue in the next fiscal year. So library staff members, including former library director Deborah Brighton, believe that the discrepancy originated in the fiscal year 2015-2016 budget, when 1.5 full-time equivalent library page positions were mistakenly eliminated from the budget rather than converted to library clerks, and then that issue had not been fixed in subsequent budgets. But as you can see, I think it's on the next one. I've got it now. You got, oh no, I'm sorry, let's see. Yes, so even at that 7.41 level, compared to fiscal year 2013-2014, headcount is still significantly lower. In fact, 2 full-time positions and 1.5 part-time full-time equivalent positions. So we just appreciate your serious consideration of this request, as we would not be able to provide the same level of service and programs without it.
Mayor, this is really, we think, just a clerical issue. We miscounted the number of part-time bodies, which lowered their budget, but we didn't actually lower the head count. And we had savings in other areas that we used to cover those salaries. And to correct this, you would see a $18,000 addition to the library budget, but it's really, we don't really see it as an addition.
Okay, any questions?
I hope every department head starts just like that. I love it.
That's the second time you've come up here with a very concise presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's usually us asking all the questions.
I need to take notes.
Yeah, creating all the time. Okay, planning and building, Sam Lee.
Boy, I'm the one to follow that, huh? So good afternoon, Mayor Boyles and council members. I think my presentation is going to be as simple as well. The net difference in additional requests is approximately $125,000. I've broken it down to the 2 divisions, and I think it's clear. First, Building and Safety Division, we're eliminating a position. It's a half administrative specialist position. It's a savings of $40,000 per year, and of course it'll be an ongoing savings. For additional professional technical, we're asking for an additional $60,000 to bring on additional help for our building inspectors on an as-needed basis. We're anticipating we're going to need additional funding. There have been a number of large projects that's gone through plan check and permits have been issued. Most notably EVA, AC Hotel, all the projects at NantWorks, Nash Street Exchange, the Hackman site. And so we think we're going to need some additional help. Just to give you an idea, just in plan check revenues alone, We anticipated for the 17-18 budget of revenue of $2 million. We did a report a couple of weeks back, and we're already at $2.2 million, and we think we're going to land at about $600,000 over what we anticipated in the revenue. And of course, as you know, when the revenue or the number of large projects or permits are issued after plan check, what follows is the abundance of inspection. So that's why the additional $60,000 is being requested. I'm also asking for an additional $25,000 in professional consulting budget to support a crime prevention plan check consultant. This is actually for the police department, which is part of the development team. And currently, for the past decade, I would say, that position's been held by one person, Lori Risk. And when she is off, as we all do, for vacation or just for succession purposes, we feel like it would be really helpful for customer service purposes to have some consulting help. So asking for $25,000 for that. And asking for another $30,000 to bring in a consultant for, actually this isn't to bring in an additional consultant. What this is we've been recruiting, and on the bottom you can see that we've been recruiting for a senior plan check engineer, and we will be recruiting for a plan reviewer for mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And as the construction industry has really ballooned up in the last several years, it's been hard to find really good people. In most recent recruitment, we've gotten a number of applicants, and so we're hopeful. But and we're being conservative, and we think we can get somebody on board in after the second quarter. With anticipation of that, I'm asking for this $30,000 because if we had somebody on board as in-house staff from day one, it's cheaper for us to have somebody on board. Does that make sense? If we have to fill that position with a consultant on an hourly rate, they cost us a lot more. So anticipating that we won't be able to fill that position for about 2 quarters, we're anticipating we're going to need that additional $30,000. Okay, so that's that. Last of the building and safety requests is an additional $15,000 for our current permit system consultant. Why do we need that? We're going out for an RFP for a new system next year. Charles and I will be doing that. We hope to implement that next year. But our current system is 16 years old. There's quite a bit of historical data. We think there's going to be some transition, conversion that's needed with an existing system. So we're anticipating additional funding need to accommodate for that. In planning, we're asking for an additional $30,000 for consultants. In our last fiscal year of 17-18, we had a budget of $20,000, and it was insufficient. This money is needed to have an environmental and traffic consultant on call. They help with projects in the early process. What I mean by that is when plans actually become projects, then the city is reimbursed for all that cost. But from time to time, there are projects that never make it to a project. But we're still providing that service, providing that information, and there's a cost to that. So this, we hope to take that consulting budget from $20,000 to $50,000 for next year. Lastly, we're asking for $3,100 to reclassify a position from office specialist to senior administrative specialist. We've looked at the job bulletin, and many of the functions for office specialists too is very outdated. It has things like taking shorthand, speed writing, dictation. And so then we started to look at, are there any other position in the city that has that position, and there isn't. They all converted to some other position. So I think it's appropriate to convert that. And this position will support not only planning, but also building and safety by filling the void that was created by losing of that half position that I mentioned at the beginning. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
That Nash Street Exchange, what project is that?
That's Raytheon Phase 1. That's in on El Segundo. Yeah, that's
what
ready to start very
Okay.
soon.
The retail shopping center.
Retail shopping center,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, I never heard that term before, thank you.
So Sam, just for clarification, a number of these costs are related to consultants to cover what you expect the increased workload to be. If for some reason the workload doesn't increase, these monies aren't expended to this full amount.
Absolutely.
These are
Absolutely.
placeholder dollars, and the planning and building budget tends to be one of the more dynamic because it is so linked to the economy. So we try to look forward. We look at past experience, look at what's in the queue, and try to estimate what we think we're going to need in the next year.
Yeah, so that was leading to my question. Sam, what's the best? I know you're measuring average plan check time by phase and in its entirety. Forget what else the other metrics are in your department. I know Net Promoter Score got implemented recently, transactional side. What are the best metrics for you? How do you know, to Greg's point, that, because my note was, well, contingent on the pace of development, because we don't know what's going to happen this year.
Absolutely.
So how do you know? What's the metric? What are the metrics you look to say, okay, productivity is being impacted right now. We need to change something.
So what I've been doing for the several years is, it's up and down. But normally, what we find is the up and down portion are the larger projects. So what I'll do is I'll run a report of greater than $1 million projects over the last 2, 3, 4 years, and it turns out that the base work, number of water heaters, number of additions, and things like that, remain pretty steady. But those ups and downs are the large projects. So I just count the large number of projects, and so I know how many of them are in construction. I know how many of them are in plan check, and I know how many of them are in the planning process. And although not every one of them become projects, but we have a pretty good feel for that.
And then what about residential plan check? Is that just doesn't vary that much, or when it does vary, it's a smaller share of the workload, or how does that impact?
Yeah, I think historically, this city, because first of all, the fees generated by residential was so low that it really didn't make a dent. And also, I think from a construction-wise, in residential projects, have been pretty minimal. Maybe in the last recent years, people actually tore down their buildings and built new ones. I think that is maybe set to change in the near future, because El Segundo land is becoming so valuable. But in past years, I never really worried about too much on the revenue side because the fees were so low.
Unless there was like another D.R. Horton project. Is there a threshold for residential where it starts to make a difference? Like 5 units or more, or is it?
Newer projects, I think on the residential side, let's just from a workload standpoint and the amount of resources we need, it's not the newer, larger projects that take up a lot of our resources. It's actually the smaller remodel projects where there's a lot of unknown in projects. They take up a lot of our time. So I don't know that there's a direct correspondence to the size of the project and the amount of resources that I need.
And Mayor, you were asking about service delivery. You track turnaround time for plan check, how many hours, how many inspections are made within 24 hours, what else?
Yeah.
Mostly that plan check turnaround
all
time,
of those
right?
things. And honestly, never really talked about this, but as far as keeping track of metrics and whatnot, I honestly have struggled with that. Partly because it's difficult to measure, and we try to measure some maybe more significant from a customer's perspective, how fast they get service, how fast they build their buildings, how fast the restaurant opens or the hotel opens, and things like that. I think there are a lot of creative ways that we could measure in the future, but right now with the system that we have, a lot of it had to be done manually, and honestly, I didn't have the resource to spend that much time doing it. But when we go to the new system next year, that's definitely one of the things I'm going to look for when we go to the RFP. How does this system? How is it going to allow me to capture some of the metrics that I want to capture?
So in regards to that new system, that's going to be a huge initiative, and it's going to require some of your current staff to basically be taken off their day-to-day duties to actually do work on the implementation. Are you just going to backfill that with additional consulting groups?
Yeah.
And we just need to make sure that you have that budgeted, because I anticipate that you're going to have to, that there's going to be 1 or 2 people in your current staff that are going to be basically taken off day-to-day completely to ensure that that system is implemented correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Then the other thing is, with the new Smoky Hollow rezoning and specific plan, you'd mentioned that there's going to be some streamlining of processes within your department as a result of plan checks and stuff like that. Will that would that approval of that new plan help alleviate some of the workload in your department?
It will, and it already has. I mean, if we brought a lot of things to streamline things in the zoning over the past 24 months, and every time that we save in that process, we're looking for more things to change. There was something that came up today of something that really made sense to make a change in the zoning code. We're going to put it on the list of things to do as soon as time is we find some time to do it. So.
Actually, to Carol's point, Smoky Hollow, do you anticipate, I mean, to me, some of the things that I've seen considered, while I can't weigh in on it because I own property there, are pretty significant departure from the current state. Do you see a lot of new development if those changes go forward? I mean, is it going to impact your workload even further?
Well, I think I hope and I anticipate that the turnaround, the types of projects will accelerate. I do, but the process that we're putting in for Smoky Hollows, we're trying to make it simpler everywhere we look. So, you know, we'll see.
Trade-off, hopefully.
Yeah, but I hope the intent of that whole Smoky Hollow plan was that we would see an acceleration of cool projects.
Okay.
Right.
I just want to make sure that as we talk about big pieces of land like Smoky Hollow, and we're going to dump $400,000 on the new process for this, if $30,000, if $20,000 was too little for consultants, and we are looking at having these things come on, is $30,000 with 4 vacancies, is that, are we undershooting on that? I mean, I think we want honesty in budgeting. I don't know what the billable hour is, but inputting and taking things, people are used to doing things by hand and throwing them in and telling them to input a new system with conceivably a number of new properties coming on and some big decisions with land use and how people are implementing those. I just want to make sure that we are honest in our budgeting. If we think it's 30 and the reality is it's 60 or 90, we just need to know that. So I mean, is there a worst case scenario number you have in the back of your head?
Yeah, these are the added dollars. I really appreciate your question and thought. I could tell you over the last 10 years, I've been kind of doing this. I've always came up ahead at the end of the year. We always had some extra money to give back to the general fund. This year, we're going to ask for more money. At the next council meeting, both planning and building are going to ask for more money. So what we're asking for here is an alignment to that. So if the workload remains same from this year to next year, this is pretty consistent. And at mid-year, if it looks like, you know, projects are going through the roof, you know, I'll be back.
It would be nice, I was thinking, kind of a tangent, but for the metrics, it would be nice to know how many of those large-scale projects we have at any given time in a quarter or whatever your reporting period is, where they're at, and what's that, because I think that's a good leading indicator to what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it'd be nice to see that too, if you don't mind.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions for Sam? Good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think he's going to be as quick. It's like 6 pages.
You got 8 minutes, Chief. We're distant.
All right, I could talk fast. I could talk real fast. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Here I am again talking to you about staffing. Unfortunately, I was the one calling Joe at the 11th hour because sadly we had an academy recruit decide this wasn't the profession for him. So because we count academy recruits as part of our sworn staffing, that moves us down to 55 actual. And you can see a breakdown of how it plays out, both people that are counted as part of that 55 but really aren't working bodies. And then even though we always say sworn and we think police officers, they still are allocated throughout the organization. And so you could see currently where our vacancies lie. Fortunately, we have a captain, active captains list now. We're going to be doing lieutenant and sergeant testing at the end of summer. But then it's always a balance too. We have to be strategic how we promote. We can't promote to the detriment of the well that's beneath it, because we obviously need police officers out there on the streets. So we will be very thoughtful moving forward about how and when to make those promotions. Oh, I have a clicker, sorry. On the non-sworn side, we're doing much better. We're only down 3 on the full-time side, and we're down 6 on the part-time, but that's because of, thanks to council's decision to add cadets. We're moving forward very robustly in getting them, but we haven't quite reached 15 yet, but we're moving forward at a very rapid pace, and you'll get to meet our cadets next week, Tuesday night. I'm bringing them to introduce them to you. As far as the breakdown on what's vacant currently, our police assistant position, we have 2 vacancies. We have 3 people in background for that right now, so I anticipate those 2 positions being filled shortly. And a police service officer, probably would recognize that as a jailer. There are our animal service officers, court liaison is all under that umbrella. We do have a vacancy. That's been a little bit lower on the pecking order as far as the just the pipeline for HR to process. We certainly intend to fill that because it's created some backlog and overtime issues and staff in the jail. But we do not have an open recruitment for that as of yet. Okay, so to the fun part, what we're asking for. Really, there's very little actual ask on this slide. The crime analyst is something council already approved, but we haven't actually budgeted the money for it. So this was approved back about 6 months ago, I believe, or so. It was Tasha. You met her the other night. And so we're asking now to put the money actually in the budget to pay for it. The background investigations, when I hired on, we had about 4 people who were PERS 960 employees who were doing backgrounds. That's a PERS no-no, you can't do that. So we, we kind of got rid of them. We didn't fire them, but they went out into the contractor world and they're working under the umbrella of a contractor. So we're just simply shifting that money from salaries that we would have been paying them over into contract services so that we can pay them. That's actually worked out really well. We've had several backgrounds done now with them. And it does provide us, not only do we have our, only a couple people took us up on that opportunity to do that, but then it's opened up a great pool of people available to us. So when we've talked in the past about the pipeline of getting people hired, as more and more people get in the pipeline, we'll have a lot of background investigators at our disposal, not just the couple that were in-house. So that'll be good once that gets underway. And then the Lexipol policy manual, because it's an increase, we put it up here. I mean, it's a relatively low dollar amount, but what we're going to be doing is taking our policy manual, which currently relies on a lieutenant to scan case law to make sure we're doing changes and updates and so forth, to Lexipol's a nationwide company that does police and fire policies, and they have attorneys on staff. This is what their job is, and it's really the standard in the industry to be using Lexipol. From a liability perspective, it makes total sense. It's accountability, making sure people read the policy, it tests them monthly on it, and it will take a considerable workload away from 2 positions that we have right now. So both, I'm not going to speak for fire, but I know at least police, we want to go to Lexipol. And the ask, the top one for the property officer position, this is something that I noticed when I first hired on, really caused me to scratch my head as to why we were doing this in a part-time capacity between CSI and property. And so I certainly saw the iceberg above the water, but I wanted to hire a consultant to let me fully understand what that iceberg looked like under the water, and it's not good. We're in a very bad position right now from not having filled that position. It was somebody that was laid off in 2010, subject to the recession. Obviously not being here, I can't comment into the rationale that went behind that. I think it had more to do with seniority in a bargaining group than anything else. But that's a critical position in the police department to be filled full-time. It's not a part-time position, and it's certainly not a position to be shared with a crime scene investigator, and there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do that. there's very strongly worded language in our audit that that position needs to be filled immediately. And we are at tremendous risk right now and exposure in the prosecution of criminal cases because of not having that position filled. Now, the person that's doing it, I don't want to say they're not doing what they're trying the best that they can. They just have too much on their plate between trying to identify bad guys on the CSI side and collect evidence and doing all they do in the field, and then doing all the work that has to happen behind the scenes in a property unit. The SWAT van, our SWAT van was purchased in 1994, and it has a 25-year life, which brings it to September of 19 when it's up at its 25 years. It was originally a 20-year service life. 5 years were added to it back when we were adding time to vehicles. And it was purchased for let me see what it was purchased for. It was purchased for $48,000. And you can see we have $48,000 after 25 years in equipment replacement. So whether money was taken or it was frozen for a period of time, or I'm not quite sure. This is not a general fund request. We're asking to use the money that's available in asset forfeiture, along with what is in equipment replacement to make us whole on this. The reason why we're asking for it now is there's a few reasons. One is that the van that we currently have is not suitable for weapon storage. It's not legally compliant with storage of federal munitions. So as a result, and it's not a secure vehicle. So our SWAT guys have to store all their stuff in the armory in the station, and when there's an activation, they have to spend time coming in here, loading everything out, getting it in the van, and going, which is really not consistent with best practices with a SWAT team. We could wait till next year, which is, I mean, technically because it was September 19 and so close to the budget year, it got pushed into the next one. But we only add $2,500 a year to the equipment replacement, so by waiting, it's going to cost us more to wait than if we build it now. Because the price of it's going to go up more than $2,500 according to the manufacturer before next year. And like a fire truck, this is a specially built vehicle, so this is about a 6-month build out. So approved now in October 1, depending on when we enter negotiations with the company, we're looking at not taking receipt of this until summertime of 2019. And I think,
Chief, just, I don't think I've ever heard the answer to this, but how often, I know we want to be prepared for the worst case scenario, but how often, like on average, SWAT team, how often are they deployed in a year?
last year, we had 16 activations, 16 call-outs. So far this year, we're at 7.
And that's within Region G, or is that just in El Segundo?
Region, that's, well, yeah, Region G.
So we're probably helping other surrounding cities. And
we really only help Hawthorne.
Okay.
We don't help out the other cities so much with SWAT activations. And but even with sometimes our stuff, it does involve us going outside the city. For example, search warrants, high-risk search warrants is what we would use a SWAT team for.
no reimbursement from Hawthorne. Do they not have the resources? Is that why we help them, or what's the?
It's a mutual thing. They help us,
Okay.
we help them.
Okay, thanks.
Chief, the Lexipol, that is in addition to the implementation cost on the ISD budget, or those, is that included in, on our budget for the Lexipol implementation has, looks like approximate numbers, and it's 75 and then 15.6?
So that's the number on the ISD budget's the initial acquisition cost. This is the
The
ongoing
annual upkeep and
annual
maintenance.
upkeep, correct. So what Lexipol does is they take your existing policy manual and they read it page by page, figure out what are you legally compliant with, what aren't you, and then they come up with the policy then that you have moving forward. So the 16,000 is their monthly training, their updates as they need to be done, and so forth.
And then as far as we're instituting the new body cameras, as well as we want to do the license plate readers, right? You already have the head count needed for those two, to reviewing the videotapes from the body cams as well as the license plate readers analysis? Like you have the staff it's already covered in your current budget?
Correct, staff
Okay.
people, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Question, On your first slide, you showed one vacancy for captain. Is that based on the model you inherited when you arrived here?
It's based on our current model, correct. I'm currently reviewing that. I anticipate keeping 2 captains, but I'm waiting to see what the independent consultant has to say.
Okay. And then second, what dollars do we have now from asset forfeiture that we can put towards the SWAT van? Is that what we have, or that's what we had back when we bought it 24 years ago?
No, our asset forfeiture account's around $750,000.
Okay.
And that money can only be used on frontline law enforcement. It can't be transferred to other city departments or anything along
But
those
you
lines.
can spend it on the SWAT van,
A SWAT van is an allowable expenditure under asset forfeiture.
and so you've got more than enough money to get the right piece,
Correct.
right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you have to? What about the replacement fund? Can replacement fund dollars be kicked back to the general fund or no?
It could be reallocated to a different purpose, yes.
Got it. So, but asset forfeiture has to only be used on the front line equipment. Yeah. Okay.
How many tactical vehicles do we have?
We have the SWAT van, and we also have a armored Humvee that was acquired through the 1033 program from the federal government. I don't think that's on our equipment replacement list.
Then when Hawthorne helps us, is that when they send up their helicopter? They still have that?
They could. What we've been using more and more lately is Torrance's drone program, their UAS program. They've been more than willing to come out on our SWAT activations, and they have drones that can fly with FLIRs, so forward-looking infrared radar. They could paint a target picture so the SWAT commander can sit back on the iPad, see what the perimeter looks like, is there any bad guys around it, and as officers are moving in, how they best deploy. So that's what we've been using most frequently that I've seen.
It's quieter than the helicopters, right?
Much quieter.
And we wouldn't want to
Less residents.
create our own drone?
We're actually, yes, I do want to create that program here, and we have officers that are working on it. They've done a kind of a little initial staff report on it. As you can imagine, there's a lot that goes into that conversation, and a lot of engagement with the community moving forward. So we're in the very early phases of what that might look like, but I can definitely see a benefit to that here in El Segundo.
So that would be next year's budget potentially.
I think so, sir. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
How long can you hold these funds? There's not a deadline you need to expend them by?
Time about asset forfeiture?
Mm-hmm.
It rolls over year after year.
Does, okay. Thank you.
It's probably worth noting the asset forfeiture stream from the government has slowed down quite a bit. Whereas before, chiefs probably made a lot of decisions expecting that money to be coming in year after year. I don't think we can make that same assumption.
Because isn't our participation in certain task force or absence of participation drives what we might receive?
Correct. So in order to receive asset forfeiture, you have to have had somebody involved in when that asset was seized, whether it was the use of one of our canines or it was through a task force where we had a body assigned. The main task force where there could be potential for future money is LA Impact, where now Captain Mendoza was assigned for many, many years. And there is some potential that money will be freed up from that. Also, as you know, there's a DEA HIDA group that works out of our dispatch center, and we regularly get money from them. That's probably been the most stable source of asset forfeiture money that they have been reimbursing us for.
All right, any other questions for the chief? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Whoops. I want to take this moment to thank the council and staff for moving this meeting to today. It was really just to give you guys an additional day of prep time. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you very much. I apologize for any inconvenience.
We were ready last time. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. So I have about 3 slides, and we'll make it as quick as possible. The main budget increases outlined here on the slide are being presented to you by division. There's 3 divisions in Recreation and Parks. In the Parks division, which is already included in our budget, is a slight increase in our contract services for landscape and tree maintenance of $115,000. These increases are due to the addition of the downtown area planters and adding that to our current landscape contract. Also, we are increasing that line item for increased maintenance over at Memory Row, which, as you know, we acquired through the closure of Tree Musketeers. And also, we currently actually have our landscape maintenance out to bid. There's an RFP on the street right now, and we're looking to get those proposals back mid-September. And we'll be evaluating those proposals and looking to potentially keep the contractor that we currently have or switch contracts. So we've allocated a slight increase, anticipating that those costs will increase a little bit. Yes, definitely.
I think, are you going to talk about trees anymore? If not, I have a thought.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. It occurred to me a while ago, I've heard from a lot of residents about the concern about the trees. And we have an arborist on I know he's very knowledgeable on staff. But it would be nice to have a metric. I know it sounds a little nutty, but to have a metric, no, I'm serious here, for the number of trees and the health of our trees in town. And I think some cities actually measure that, like Tree City USA certification. But it would be nice to be able to tell the residents actually our local urban forestry is healthy, and here's why.
Sure.
And also to know how backlogged we are in terms of trees, because I know that was an issue for a while. I'm not sure if it still is in terms of taking out the trees that need to be removed, that are dead or dying.
Yeah, we actually, I'm glad you brought that up. We're working on an educational pamphlet right now that has that information.
Okay, great.
Our contractor on the tree side, which is West Coast Arborists, and our city staff have access to a software program called Arbor Access, and all of our inventory, our tree inventory, is in that software. It gives us the number of trees by species. It allows them to make notations on the health of the tree, and also even keep some maintenance records in there. So a lot of times when we'll get maybe an insurance claim related to a tree, we can go back and take a look at the history of that tree.
Is that something we could report out every so often, maybe through the environmental committee? Or
Definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The next bullet point here is equipment replacement fund. And this is something Joe had mentioned a little bit earlier about the cleanup process that the staff did, I believe, last year. What you'll see in the capital improvement project list in past years was a lot of requests for $200,000, $300,000 for a playground here, playground there. And it's a big ask, $200,000 and $300,000. So what we decided to do with the blessing of the finance department is actually build those into an equipment replacement program. And so every year we'll be accumulating funding towards the replacement of equipment pieces like playground equipment, picnic tables, picnic shelters, and things like that. So you'll start seeing less and less one-time asks for large amounts of money from park equipment-related purchases. And so, for instance, we did Hilltop a year or two ago. So instead of coming to you in 20 years asking for $250,000 or $300,000, we'll already have that fund set aside to just do a better job of maintaining and replacing that equipment.
And how did you get to the 125?
So that's all of the pieces of equipment, an estimated value of those when they become up for replacement. And then it's an annual.
Okay, thanks. So it's an accounting practice more than anything else.
Correct. And as I mentioned earlier, we went through this exercise of cleaning up the equipment replacement fund. So even with adding this item in there, we're still, the total funding for the equipment replacement used to be about $1.8 million per year. We're now just below 1.5, closer to 1.4 million. So even adding this in there, because of the clean out process we did, we're still putting less money into the equipment replacement fund, but still meeting our overall goals of meeting those depreciation.
Okay,
Is the Acacia Park equipment allocated as part of that project, or would that come out of this?
The Acacia Park is going to be a request under the CIP for this year.
Good question.
Question before we move on that?
Sure.
Do we have something in the budget now in regards to fixing parks when things break? So it's not a full park replacement, but you know, one of the duckies on a spring broke off, and
yeah,
is the ducky coming back? Like,
we do. The ducky.
There's been a missing ducky at Sycamore Park for quite some time. Oh, you never hear the end of this missing duck, because now there's only one spring-loaded.
We do. In our operating budget, we have a line item for repair and maintenance.
Got it. Okay.
So moving on to the recreation division, also program related and operational related, already included in the 18-19 budget, but just wanted to call attention to the major increases in operating supplies. This is for enhanced programming. A lot of it is related to aquatics in our anticipation of offering more programs to the community at the Plunge and at the new aquatics facility. And also our focus for the next year in recreation is enhancing our teen center programming. So that's built into there as well.
Do you know, Meredith, how much of this is just minimum wage increases?
For the next line item, you mean?
Of the 641, yeah.
Yes, I do.
Is it? Okay, I'm curious.
It's about 16,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I have that information in more detail if you need it. Every year it'll get more and more. Yeah, we're looking at probably the following year, another 30 on top of that. So we're probably looking at, I don't know, an 8 to 10% increase every year. And so part-time personnel, 640, again, 95% of that is for the new aquatic center and the increased programs at the Plunge. Questions?
And then just real quick, so I know that we have, in the current budget, we had done the facility assessment project.
Yes.
And we don't have, do we have any information on that as far as, is there any facility upgrades that are going to need to come out, that have come out of that?
I think that'll be
No.
part of the capital.
Okay.
And that's actually included in the CIP discussion that Ken's going to go over.
Okay.
So this is our main request for this year, personnel related for part-time personnel. And earlier in the meeting, you talked a lot about communications and strategy and what the city's currently doing and what we're looking to do in the future. El Segundo TV is a division that is, their primary focus is communicating to the public and making sure that information is available to the public. If you don't know about the division, there's 3 full-time staff members in the division, a TV program manager, a graphic artist, and a TV program specialist. And those 3 gentlemen handle the lion's share of what comes out of that division with the support of multiple on-demand type part-time employees who cover anywhere from camera operations to editing programs and producing. They're also our on-camera talent. This request is related to the evolution and sort of the development of what's happening in communications over the last 5 years. And historically, in fact, technically, they're still called community cable, but we know that that's outdated in terms of what their function really is. So we call them El Segundo TV, probably more suited to be called media services, given really what their primary functions are today in terms of video production and helping other departments produce communications. This request is basically to cover and allow the technical expertise that's needed by our 3 full-time staff to properly deliver on the requests that are coming from our internal departments. We view this as a pretty important piece, and also we don't want to forget that there are a large part of our population that doesn't rely on social media, doesn't rely on electronic or digital communication. So we still want to make sure that we offer our TV programming and any of our event coverage for our community organizations and some of our legacy programs. So the ask is for a senior video tech 2. This is a pay rate of about $18 an hour. and would work approximately 30 hours a week. And then the second position is a Video Tech 3, pay rate of $12.45 an hour, and we are estimating about 25 hours a week for this position. The ask is particularly interesting because the number of hours really requires these positions to be enrolled in PERS. And PERS has limitations, so if a part-time employee works over 1,000 hours in a year, they are enrolled in PERS. And what that averages out to is about 19 hours a week. So these positions, we're really looking for part-time staff who have the talents and expertise and technical abilities to fill in into this division, and consistency and the ability to have a regular type of a schedule and somebody who will stick around for a while. It's really critical that they have the ability to work about 25 to 30 hours a week. Again, so this would allow us to continue to offer our internal community and customer service, as well as our external service requests. And the last bullet there is something that, the next slide will actually cover as well, is we currently have 2 full-time vacancies in our Parks division, which are being filled. And all of our qualified candidates are actually coming from in-house, and those are part-time positions that are enrolled in PERS because they work 30 to 35 hours a week. And so the way that I look at it from a department-wide standpoint is I have about 12 positions, part-time positions, that are enrolled in PERS for various reasons. They have specific responsibilities. And what we could do is, seeing that, assuming that they pass the oral interviews, that we'll be moving 2 of our current part-time PERS employees in Parks into full-time positions. We would be able to sort of shift those 2 positions elsewhere in the department, which would be El Segundo TV. And that's that slide outlining our 2 current vacancies in Parks. That's all I have.
So if you go back one, Meredith, you're saying that it might not be the additional 50,000 potentially. Is that what you're saying?
Right. I think that we would see some of that PERS cost coming from Parks savings.
Okay.
The actual salaries out of this are probably about 40,000, and then benefits on top of that equal 50.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't realize you were done. Okay, thanks.
So Ken is going to be speaking to his department request. He's also going to present the preliminary CIP list.
All right. Honorable Mayor, council members, I guess this year I get to say we saved the best for last, right? So quickly, our personnel budget proposal to upgrade a current senior administrative specialist to an admin tech specialist over in the water for just under $4,000 a year, the impact to the Water Enterprise Fund. Where's my little notes there? Sorry. When I came in to the department a couple of years ago and looked at the organization, one of the things that we did together last year was upgrade the management analyst position to the senior management analyst position that we're finalizing in recruitment for, given that is really the hub of the Public Works Department. Everything kind of goes through that, programs and contracts and budgets. And this position in the Water Division is the same type of hub over there, responsible for purchase orders and budgets, accounting, working closely with finance on all the water billing, has to know the operations, basics of the water distribution, work with the meter reader to ensure accurate billing for all the city, and really assist the supervisor with our $23 million of water purchasing budget. So there's an obvious need, so that's the purpose for that request. And you are aware with the solid waste collections cost increase, we already have in our operations budget the $404,000 that you see there. So any questions on that slide?
So Ken, that amount you placed in, the 404, that's based on the proposal from Republic that we did receive?
Right, from that $9.88 to up to the $16.55 or so.
Yeah. So it's just an estimate at this point, depending on how it works through.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
And that's the added cost on top of what's our last year's cost was $500,000?
The current, right, so if we're at 500 going to 900.
The whole thing comes up to about 900?
955, yeah.
Okay.
We're assuming no cost recovery at this point, right, on the Prop 218 matter?
For this budget, correct.
Okay, thanks.
Is this for me? Right click. All right. So one of the things that would be great for Public Works is to fill our recruitments. We've always been about running a 10% short staff, and what we have now is our facilities maintenance supervisor due to a recent retirement, 2 positions of our water maintenance workers, which is actually great because I'm particularly proud of what the water division has done and what we've done there with recruiting and promotions internally. Street maintenance workers, we have had 2 resignations that we need to fill. Recent resignation in the engineering division of a senior engineering associate. Our public works inspector position has been open for a while due to that resignation, and recently an internal promotion for one of our part-time custodians to a full-time custodian leaves us with these 8 positions to recruit for. So no new requests. Well, the senior management analyst is not on here. We're finishing that. The facilities maintenance supervisor is open as we speak. Any questions on that?
That's
So-
part of the 39 that Joe mentioned earlier?
Correct.
Where he said
It's part of the 39 citywide positions that we're looking for.
You have the 8. Yeah, we have 8.
8 here. Yeah.
Thanks.
So let's get into the capital program for this year.
Ken, I just want to mention that the exhibit that council has, there was an update to it, so Leanna is passing out the updated version.
So that one sheet is on 3 slides I'll go through here. So before getting into the details, prior to the expansion of the engineering division, we were delivering about $3 to $4 million of capital projects per year. And the past 2 years, we've seen at about a $10 to $12 million clip, where that's ultimately in the end at $10.5 million, what you're looking at in the bottom line for this year's deliverable capabilities for the resources we have. So we've done some great things. You'll recall from Imperial Highway resurfacing and aggressive roadway citywide resurfacing as well. Upgraded that program. The campus fields turf replacement, vast improvements for Fire Station number 1, and police department improvements, and both of those roofs needing replacement were done, and miles of water mains and sewer mains, and a lot of great things that happened as a result of expanding that workforce. So we're proud of that for sure. The thing that we're looking at with a budgeted average, you know, I look back in our past 2 years of expanded programs where we've had $15 million with carryover. The first year I was here, and then you might recall from the last quarterly presentation I did, we started with $17 million this year, but really with the kind of putting the water infrastructure projects of $4 million in value aside while we revamped and recruited and filled all the positions in the water division to get that going. We're at $13 million. And with this first slide that's up here, that $2.2 million number, that 13 minus 2, we're looking at, you know, $11 million for this year. So that seems like it's within our deliverable capacity. And again, hence the reason in the end, we're looking at about $10.5 million total for the program. A couple of highlights I'll touch upon was the hockey rink replacement is moving forward. Hopefully there's going to be a budget enhancement with that. We're talking with the Los Angeles Kings and have a potential partnership there that should assist with resurfacing and replacing boards in the fence there. That would be a good thing that we've been waiting for. The downtown upgrades and beautification, you might have a question on what's that, $188,000. That's what's left from last year's effort with the downtown committee. It's done a great job in identifying projects from the string lights and the landscape beautification. And this major project is the street tree uplighting, which will also cut and cap all the electrical conduit and electrical outlets that you saw due to public notice of possible trip hazards. Park and Recreation and Streets went out there and red taped everything. It's a temporary basis to make sure it's more noticeable. So that's all our carryover from last year. So we have the main course for Public Works, all our basic master plan improvements. The water and sewer and streets and sidewalk that you are aware of each and every year for a total of about $5 million. The water main improvements, we're looking at about 2 or 3 projects, and we do go through, like our streets, our master plans, see the most critical needs. And then the pump station rehabilitation, that's the final phase of the lifeguard pump station. So the CPAC process, which began months ago, and we brought it to the Planning Commission on August 9th, has gone through its usual vetting and ranking, and we're presenting these top-ranked projects. And the ones I will highlight for you, first, as Councilmember Perstuck said, the citywide facilities repairs at $1 million is an estimate, a placeholder. In anticipation of the most urgent projects that we expect to come out of this report. We're probably looking at December for a draft, say a study session, to come to council, and then finalization of the report in February 2019. That'll include short, medium, long-term capital improvement program for all the facilities needs in our city.
A question on that?
Yeah, sure.
Mayor, I don't recall the capital improvement committee's recommendations going to the Planning Commission in the past. I thought they always came to council here.
It does. It has always gone to Planning Commission as part of the process to have them find the plan in conformance with the general plan actions.
Okay, thanks. Forgot about that.
Just a couple others. The 500 block of East Walnut drainage improvement is to resolve some flooding problems that were reported on and had the chance to address. McCarthy Court Street improvements are similar in nature with routes, and that'll be something to similarly address some ponding issues. And the Class 3 bike route improvement project is there, and that's something that is primarily Main Grand and Nash, and several other streets, but that was something that was a council request that made it up the line through CPAC for a high enough rating. The double line below the $150,000 California Street storm drain project is the staff capacity. That's where that, in combination with, for here, the previous 2 slides and your entire program is where we're at for recommending $10.5 million for a program this year. And that's it.
Can the class 3, is that also, that get us working towards the commitment on the regional master bike plan? Is that what that, or?
Right. Appreciate the question. One of the things that we, City Engineer LaFon Shu discussed at the Planning Commission was we have a 3-year plan to implement our regional bike program, bike lane program. And this class 3 with the signage in the showers would be the first part. We've identified the next phase of the class 2 bike lanes, which are around town, and then as well as partially some class 1 bike paths, which are separate from the roadway. So we do have a 3-year plan in that. It's part of the 3-year overall CIP plan that we're developing. So it is definitely something we're focusing on.
But nothing within this component of the overall plan would achieve getting people bike lane or Sharrow path from east of PCH to here? Because that's Elsagunda Boulevard, right, that we're using for that piece?
Grand Avenue would be.
That would be, that's part of the
Grand
Smoky
Avenue.
Hollow plan, I believe. Correct?
Yes, the Grand Avenue Class 3 is recommended in the Smoky Hollow plan that's coming to council next week, and
Okay.
So, but
does
the-
get you to Pacific Coast Highway. I can't recall if it continues.
I thought it was Elsagunda Boulevard was part of the connecting route.
It is east of Pacific Coast Highway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So, can the $150,000 here for the class bike, that does not include the Smoky Hollow plan bike Sharrows?
Just
Correct.
Grand Avenue.
So if we approve that Smoky Hollow plan, we have to now then assign money to that. So that's right, correct?
Well, there is a class 2 bike lane proposed for Elsagunda Boulevard in the Smoky Hollow area, according to this map.
That's what I thought from the master plan with the region.
Right.
It's on Grand.
But Greg, to answer
Well,
Carol's
Grand is
question-
the class 3, and Elsagunda, I'm looking at the map, it's a class 2 bike lane.
Greg, by approving, seeing as we're not going to be there, but by approving a new specific plan, that does not trigger immediate
Funds, that's right.
funds
That's
and
correct.
That's what I'm
things.
saying.
It's
That's
more
correct.
just like, here's a specific plan, we can work off this moving forward
Right, so we'd
Yeah.
have to go and allocate funds for that.
at some point.
Yes.
And I think we're relaxing, at least the version I saw, the proposal is to relax some of the parking ratio requirements. So, I mean, having multimodal, I think, is critical to the vibrancy and success of that area. I probably should stop saying anything further, but my point is we should be considering allocating some dollars.
Yeah. Well, that's
Right.
why I just want to make it clear that this class 2-3 bike route improvements does not include anything that's outlined in the Smoky Hollow specific plan.
So it's no longer Elsagunda Boulevard, because I'm pretty sure the regional plan that I saw that we committed to with that group that governs, that's involved with that, had Elsagunda Boulevard as a.
You're correct.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago, El Segundo Boulevard was planned as a bike route on the west side of town. We are going to ask council next Tuesday night to reconsider that and to instead consider putting parking on the north side of El Segundo Boulevard.
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
This is one of those prioritization decisions about what's most important. And I think a couple of other interesting, exciting points of next year's CIP. Setting aside money to begin planning for the renovation of the plunge is a major effort of ours and one that's long overdue. And I like to tie things back to the resident and business surveys and the employee engagement surveys. Improving the entryways to El Segundo was one of the major comments made in the resident survey, and you can see $150,000 starting to go towards that effort at Main and Imperial.
The skate park. So do I read this? Does this mean, because it's listed but we don't have the staff capacity, that it made it on the CIP cut, but we don't have the capacity in house?
That's in part of it, and it was one of the lowest ranked by the CPAC.
What's you know what the anticipated cost of that facility is? I ask because it's highly utilized.
It's
highly
a
utilized.
approximately $200,000 project.
Okay, because I just know from personal experience that that park is inadequate in terms of design and functionality, and it's also got high utilization. And it's a small footprint that gets high utilization, right next to a teen center that could use some love too, which I think will be part of the facilities assessment that your group's doing, Ken. But I would like to see something done for that skate park. I think it was never built right in the first place, and it's been what now, 12 years? How long has it been?
It opened in 2002, so 16 years. For council's consideration, there were 19 projects considered, a rank of 27 for a high for the plunge to a rank of points. I'm sorry, point score of 27 for the plunge, and then point score for the last project of 9 for the skate park.
I mean, to be honest with you, I would actually opt for the skate park over the Main and Imperial Entry beautification project.
You know, I had a conversation with someone from Parks and Rec about a year ago, trying to partner with like a nonprofit, Tony Hawk's Association or something, or group, to come in and do a redesign. And so I know that there were talks about that, about it getting funds somewhere other than here.
Yeah, I would think that would be a great venue for co-sponsorship or something too, right?
Branding, right?
Yeah.
Ken, before you go away, can I just ask you, since, you know, first year guy up here, this spreadsheet that you brought to council last year in this budget session, was the number similar to this? 10.5
The 10.5?
Yeah.
No, it was higher. I think it was about 13.
Good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm going to ask the next dumbest question. Do we have, it says here that the original budget would be shown in parentheses.
That's an error. Sorry about that.
So do we want to
From a previous.
Is that, are we able to see what the original budgets were on these things? On the subsequent? Or is that on a different form?
For the carryover budgets, the top.
Yeah, particularly for the carryover budgets.
We could, but typically, based on a percentage that has been used in either the design or partial construction effort, these numbers have been reduced by that much.
In the same vein that when Sam was up here, I guess what I'm looking for, if there's something that we need, if the numbers are relatively soft, because there's a number that we should mentally plan for, aside from a 15% contingency, that if something goes year to year, that this thing is going to extend over the life of it to a higher budget number, that's something that for planning purposes, you know, we would want to be able to eyeball. Certainly it's not a make work project, but if those things are, I mean, I can do the math on this. I just didn't know if the number was available.
So let me see if I could.
Sorry, the logic. My logic on this is for of these carryovers. If the original budget is showing, if we're routinely pushing north of a 15% contingency on projects, then conceivably, when we see something on here that says the plunge is about Acacia Park's going to be $350,000, then we mentally need to say that, well, that's probably going to be 25% higher, because our run rate on these is we're going to overshoot a contingency.
Let me answer it this way. The carryover projects are due to basically circumstances that were unanticipated, for additional work, for vetting a design, or in construction cases, unforeseen conditions in the ground, right?
To be clear, I'm not assigning blame. I just want to make sure that we have, in the vein of honesty and numbers, much with like Sam, if we're going to have more work on the things that we talked about with him, you know, that we should have a mental number around that the Acacia Park number may be closer to 400,000 or something.
So, Ken, I don't know if I can maybe
please
address it. So there is contingency amounts built into all these projects, and any unused dollar amounts then just get left in reserves, get swept back into the general fund. I'm not sure.
I'm hearing two questions or comments. One is, with the carryover projects, is that the amount that's still left to be done, or the total amount that was planned last year? And is that total amount number still valid given a year has gone by, right?
Yeah, primarily is the total amount number still valid. If this amount left to be done is exceeding the 15% contingency we busted in, that's okay. It's not ideal, that's okay. I just want to make sure that as we look to projects that are projects of choice as opposed to projects that are critical, that we know, have a reasonable amount that, like, look, this number might be a little bit soft.
I understand. The numbers presented are the numbers to actually be needed for each individual project to complete them this coming fiscal year.
But in some cases, it was based on an estimate last year, and we haven't bid the projects out yet, so it could go up or down from what we projected the previous year.
It could, but if we saw that much of a change in the industry and in our bids, we would make that recommendation herein.
So if you saw any of last year's items that are carrying over where you thought there was a serious underfunding, we would be asking council now for some additional funds to complete those.
Correct.
So I've got
Chris,
to
does
give
that-
a full report to a constituent about a sidewalk over on Pine, west of Virginia. You know what the status of that project is? We talked about it 8 months ago or something. I think you put it on a list.
Is it an area, excuse me, is it an area that does not have a sidewalk?
Correct.
Yes.
So that's a bigger discussion, and the way we talked about that is much like sewers and storm drains and other infrastructure, the city does not construct new improvements. We take them over and maintain them, and sidewalks are no different, unless it's a special request. But that's typically how our city and all other agencies that I know of work. There are many missing sidewalk segments throughout our city, and I'm looking down, and sorry I didn't put it on the screen, but there's plenty around. So there could be a program or project established to specifically develop a program where we'd have to develop rating criteria as to why one area of sidewalk should be designed and constructed as opposed to another. I've talked to folks that say we don't want the sidewalk in front of my house because then people are going to walk in front of my house. So, interestingly enough, there's always different opinions, but it's not something we have in our program right now.
So your program is more about repairing existing sidewalks than adding new sidewalks.
That's true. That's true. There's a tremendous backlog that we, Streets Department, attack on a regular basis, both through engineering, our capital program, of course, but streets, one of the KPIs, of course, is sidewalk grinds. Those are all liabilities and things that we need to tackle. So we definitely have enough on our plate with the existing infrastructure, but to construct the new infrastructure is something this body could consider in creating that type of policy decision.
So I can, just so I understand this correctly, in many areas of the city where the sidewalks exist, the sidewalks are technically on city property. They're not on personal property or real property owned by the property owner, correct? I mean, because
So
I
if the
know
city
when I go to the city and find out, I want to know where the property line is, it's typically like 6 feet in from the curb face or something, and usually the sidewalk is within that 6 feet, which is technically not the resident's property.
It depends. The term is the underlying fee owner, right? I'm sure you know that. But typically the back of sidewalk is considered the public right-of-way, and then there are areas that property owners don't realize they actually own the area in the parkway and the sidewalk. So those conditions do exist. And Street and Highways Code basically says you, property owner, are responsible for your frontage in front of your house until you notify the agency that owns the easement, the public right-of-way.
So maybe this is a better question for Mr. King over there, but with ADA lawsuits, you know, I know that when a corner lot property wants to be developed, usually planning will smack on them that, hey, you have to update to an ADA curb on the corner, right?
That's us. That's engineering.
Sorry, that's engineering. Let Sam wear it. But if there's not a sidewalk in place, and let's say this person on a wheelchair says, oh, I can't go down that way, there's no sidewalk, and I go out on the street and I get hit by a car, are we now opening ourselves up to liability because we have not provided like a safe passage for those people. I don't know. I understand what you're saying, that if it doesn't exist, we're not making more of it, but we live in this world of laws.
Yeah, good afternoon, council. I think without researching it, I think the quick answer would probably be no, the city wouldn't be liable, because the city, I don't think, is necessarily responsible to put in sidewalks. It's only the city's obligation is to require sidewalks when there's new projects. So I don't think the city would be liable in that circumstance.
Thank you.
How much is a sidewalk, like roughly, for a block to construct? Not a block. Some of the ones I'm thinking of that Don was referring to are like short blocks. You know, yeah, like 250 feet. You know, just west side of town.
Basically $10 a square foot to remove and replace it.
$10 a square foot. And then to your point earlier, the property owner, maybe they don't have the rights to the public land there, but could they actually oppose the sidewalk? And we would have to agree to not construct a sidewalk?
I think, and Mr. King can answer this if I'm wrong here, as the in the public right of way, which we would confirm that this sidewalk area is within the public right of way before we construct it. I don't believe they could oppose that. So it's the right of the city to build the infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you.
That is not going to be a good report for me to deliver, and as the messenger, I might require some protection there.
I will go with you, I promise.
Thank you, sir.
I don't think you walk your dogs by there like I do every other day.
Get your
so
tell
I'm
them
with
you're
you.
getting it on the capital improvement projects list for next year.
$10 per square foot. Remove and replace.
Did it not get voted on? Oh, jeez.
Thank you.
Council?
Any
All
other
right.
questions for Mr. Berkman?
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
And so before we move on, one of the line items I wanted to point out is the citywide facility repair. So there's a placeholder of $1 million for that item.
Yeah, saw that. And at what point do we want to talk about all of the proposed, proposals from the different departments right now?
And maybe just a couple more slides to get through
Okay.
that. I have just general basic slides, and then we can get into that discussion.
Okay.
Some upcoming financial decisions. So these are both short-term and long-term that have an impact on the cities. Continuing to allocate dollars for the CalPERS unfunded liability, review of current business model for trash, which we are currently doing. But then we also have to look at water and sewer. Results of direction on the golf course, that's in process. Prioritizing and funding implementation of new technology. Land use discussions, adoption of a 3-year CIP, and infrastructure financing, which I know Public Works is diligently working on that right now. Implementation of employee engagement programs, so we do just touch on that in this proposed budget. Future salary and compensation model, labor negotiations. As we all know, labor negotiations are currently ongoing. And maintaining prudent reserve levels to weather through the next recession. And that's different opinions, but economists are saying maybe in 2 years from now, a year and a half from now, they're anticipating a mini recession. And just to reiterate, Council did approve a 19% reserve level for 18-19. That brings it to about 13.6 million. Plus, we have the economic uncertainty reserve of 2 million. And then here, I guess the bottom line is what we're focusing on: the $6.8 million of undesignated general fund dollars, and that's what this sheet before you is allocating out, that $6.8 million. And I do have on there one-time costs versus ongoing, so that's listed. We do have the associated strategic goal that the ask is associated with. And here's just a breakdown by category of that $6.8 million. And I guess I would ask Council at this time, this is probably a good time to go over the sheet, and maybe what items do you have a preference of excluding? I don't know if you want to go one by one, that might take quite some time. But any dollars that are not approved, the council's going to have to make a decision. Do we keep that in undesignated reserves, or do we put that in another bucket, say, for instance, the unfunded pension liabilities, or towards the 115 trust?
What,
something else
Joe,
to talk
what would you do with additional funds for pension use, like to address
So
that?
we could use it towards paying down the unfunded pension liabilities. Those are all those
Do we still,
line items.
Yeah, do we still have some negative amortization line items?
There will be for several years.
And how much, like if you were paying down the principal on that those negative amortization lines, how much would that be roughly? Do you know? Ballpark?
Is it, yeah, is, are you asking
No,
for
how
savings?
much would be required? No, I'm not looking at what we'd save in interest over time to pay those down, all those negative amortization line items.
So for the miscellaneous group, we did a refinance refunding of that entire plan from a 30-year to a 22-year.
Yeah.
That eliminated all the negative amortization for the miscellaneous plan.
Great.
So the two groups that we have to address still are fire and PD, the classic members.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say there's got to be at least $30 to $40 million of negative line items there between the two groups.
Okay. So the opportunity to address that is almost endless.
It's right.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Yes.
So Mayor, maybe you want to take this in subject or pieces. You could discuss the capital improvement list, see if you're in agreement.
I think
there. You could talk about the pension, and if you're in agreement there, and then we could get to the department request.
Well, let me run this by the council from a process standpoint. I was thinking, I took notes based on some of the proposals that were made by department, and I was hoping we could go through that.
Okay.
Because I don't think everybody believes that everything that was asked for at the department level should be allowed or can be allowed. So maybe we just go department by department, see if there's consensus on some of the changes. Does that work for you guys? Don, you okay with that? That's when each department head was coming up. So it starts with, I think the first group was IT, yeah, Charles' group.
And everything's summarized on.
Oh, is it in the same order as well? No.
Yes, so we do
it's not.
have city clerk's office, city manager, finance, and HR, which
It's
were in July.
alphabetical, but it's not in the same order with which it was presented, I think, which is okay.
Right.
I took notes based on. So can we go department by department, the order in which they were presented, as opposed to this big sheet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's start with IS. Any?
Yeah, the other departments were presented the previous time. Yeah.
City clerk went first.
Yeah, so
I
that
remember
we only
furniture.
we only heard half today.
Furniture.
Oh, that's
request.
right. Jeez, that's right. Oh,
So,
boy.
Mayor,
Yeah.
what I did do in this giant sheet
That's
is
right.
it's in order
Got it.
by
Okay.
department if you want to use
No
that
wonder I
sheet.
couldn't get the 6.8 million to add up. Okay, that makes more sense. All right, let's start there then. City clerk's office. Any changes to what's been proposed from the council?
The kiosk, the expenditure for a kiosk, is that, I know that we'd mentioned with the skate park, there might be an opportunity to have an interested entity or a nonprofit do it. That this seems like exactly the sort of thing that some service-oriented projects are. Is the kiosk obviously serves a public interest to public notices. It can be used for publishing. You know, if there's updates to emergency response plans, it would seem like that there are innumerable youth groups that do exactly that sort of thing that might benefit from this as a project. So I tend to think that that's something that, as a city, we can find people in the community who might do for us.
Yeah, we just had one church in town ask for some projects. We were steering them towards, I think, Imperial and Maine is one thing to consider with your staff. But yeah, I agree. That seems like a great place to start. You guys okay with at least exploring that idea?
Mm-hmm.
On the clerk's list, we like everything but that kiosk, and that we'd expect someone else to do. Is that
At
what
least
we're
I
saying?
think the idea is explore the possibilities. Is there a group that would like to take that out? An Eagle Scout project,
Okay.
Latter-day Saints. I think they were looking to help out with some things. Yeah, parking lot. Parking lot for assistance. I like that idea. Is everyone on board with that?
Yep.
Okay.
So then their total would be 72,000 ask.
Or are we doing the remodel? Is it-
Well, I think each one of these, if you look at it, it kind of leads into one another. They want to know what they can destroy, right? Then they want to scan and get rid of the paper mess that's there of what's left that they can't destroy, right? And then they want this, professional service development specific strategic work plan goals. I don't remember exactly what Ms. Weaver was said about that, but then the remodel, she is working on I don't know, I feel like she's being eaten by the copy machine in there, the way it's set up. It's pretty rough.
These are all one-time costs as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Is the Dutch style door to keep pesky council members out? Like, is it like a half door? Is that what? I don't remember.
She did want to have facial recognition installed on it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
I'm
put
sure
a
that's what
vegetable
its
on there.
purpose is.
Go near it.
We could put her in the vault, Yeah, what are we gonna do when we have all that space after the paper's gone?
Does anyone else feel strongly
What is-
about the $14,000 remodel?
All right, well, I'm going to ask you guys a question since the three of you were here last year. How does this normally go? Is it, hey, yeah, this is awesome. We have this extra money. Let's spend it all? Or, can we look at this from more of like, theoretically, what would we like to try to accomplish? Because if we go through here and just like line item, we can justify for or against almost every single one of these.
I think you need to ask yourself, what are we looking to achieve? Or to your point, I think there's some things that absolutely make sense because there's a return, there's a strong need, there's other things that could be deferred. And again, we have this exhaustive list of capital needs, improvement needs that we're going to be addressed with once we get this survey back. Right now, as a placeholder of $1 million. And we've got this daunting pension liability ahead of us. So I think we have to be very frugal when we look at these to determine whether or not it really makes sense. So, we've gotten to the point, I think the staff's done an incredible job of prioritizing these for us. They've all made the case for why they think they need these things. Surely we cannot approve all of these. We have to decide which are more important. I made notes last time, this time as well, in terms of what I thought would make sense from a justification standpoint, and which things I think we could wait and see, either midterm or in the next budget year. So did that address your question? It's kind of went like this last time.
Yeah. So, Mayor, there's also some things I'd like to recommend that we spend money on that are not on this list. And we're always going to have a finite amount of money. We can always find things greater than that, especially with the pension liabilities that we have, and especially if we're going to hoard as much money as we are in reserves, we're going to have a finite amount. So we've got to make choices.
So you're saying, Don, did you have some things you want to bring forward that aren't on this list?
Right.
Okay. Do you want to talk about those now?
Sure.
Okay.
I think that we need to beef up the amount of money that we allocate for litigation with LA International Airport. We're putting aside $150,000 a year. I don't think that's a serious amount. They're going to roll over us, and at some point we're going to need to initiate litigation against them, and we're going to need a couple $1 million to get their attention, and we're not tooled up for it. So I don't think we have a serious enough bank account with respect to keeping up the best interests of the city, given the damage that they're planning to continue to do here. So that's one area.
Okay.
Another area is I think the city here should get some money in the aquatic center towards the new pool so that Mr. Lundquist is not left holding the bag. He's been historically so generous to everybody. He's stepped up here and he's been able to get some contributions towards the commitment he made. We don't really have any skin in that game. The money the city put in was money Mr. Lundquist gave us and Mr. McKenzie. So I don't like to see him holding the bag on this, because you know what he'll do is he'll just come back and he'll start to advance the plunge project. So I just think we should help him out a little bit, because he's helped us out on so many fronts for so long, and put some money into it.
Well, at least on the redesign, we don't have any money on the redesign of the plunge.
Yeah.
There's been no allocation.
There's $100
Oh,
grand.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just to scope it out though, Carol, $100 just to scope out what.
I
would be
don't know what
required.
he'd need. I talked to Sherry Kramer, and I think she said he's put in $2 million of his own dollars, and he's got it up to 5.6, I think she said, or 5.4. I don't know if he's going to be able to close that, if he can get somebody to buy naming rights to the pool. But once we do get that all paid off, then we have the plunge project in front of us, and that's going to be a few million more, I'm sure. So I just would like to support him, because he supported us for so long on so many things, and not just this city, but everything around it. And that takes money as it builds goodwill with him. So those two things are on my mind, and they're not on this list here. And maybe I'm bringing them up too late, because I'm sure all the departments want to get everything they've asked for. I totally appreciate that. We're blessed to have this much money to debate about. We could have more if we didn't hoard money, but we've been over that. So that's my input on that. Drew.
Okay, thank you, Don. Council comments?
I'm going to agree with him on the LAX. I mean, we're entering in a phase where we are going to have to fight them.
What do we have budgeted? I think.
Yeah, we budget $75,000 for legal services, $75,000 for lobbying services. Would be hard to estimate what our needs are.
Yeah, and I guess if things got, I mean, look, the reality is, well, we shouldn't talk that much about it, but part of the reason that we sued and then settled with LAMP was because we knew that a lawsuit would be incredibly expensive to the taxpayers and to all of us. What are your thoughts, Greg?
Well, we don't know what the future holds, but we do have an economic uncertainty fund that council could use for this purpose at some point during next fiscal year if the need arises.
Okay, Joe, you had a thought?
Yeah, also, if we continue to have the vacancies we do, we're going to have quite a large amount of savings in salary and benefits. Mid-year, we can allocate money towards that purpose, if that was the council's will.
Yeah, we got to Don's point, we got two major, well, a couple major projects that LAX is throwing our way that we don't even have the parameters on yet, that are going to be pretty disruptive in nature.
They're just going to keep going. What did we get out of the LAMP deal? We got them to pave a street that they should have done 20 years ago, and allocate $50,000 for a study of parking. It was a complete joke, because we know what the impact they're having on our city and on North Del Air. So I just don't think, I'm not willing to negotiate anything with them for any more people and more gates.
Well, one viewpoint on this could be that you've made a decision, at least preliminary decision, to increase your citywide reserves from 18% to 19% next year. And so you're putting additional funds away. It's also a percentage of a larger number. You have additional reserves that you're potentially creating. Council could direct us to use those funds for this purpose during the year.
Yeah. And LAMP, Don, having served on that subcommittee, the alternative was to spend $250,000 in litigation and lose. That was the alternative. Anyway, all right, what about on the aquatics? Thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I get the sentiment and the philosophical conversation, but the commitment that the previous council made to the community was we were going to use our 1.8, or I think it ended up being closer to $2 million. Wiseburn was going to commit their 6, and South Bay Sports was going to come in with the rest, either through Mr. Lundquist's generosity or through donations. And that was the community expectation that was set when we decided to build the pool and build the more expensive option of the pools.
Okay. Chris? Scott?
I mean, there's a fundraising apparatus that exists for this. I mean, that people can fill the pool. I think that we have heard very clearly in the election campaign about the people who want to support the pool are free to do so and understand how to do so. I think the priority for a lot of people, as we've heard in great numbers, is allocating money toward the plunge.
Allocating money towards the plunge.
And that certainly is not meant to denigrate the generosity or all the work from the school district and the nonprofits and Mr. Lundquist that have gone toward the aquatic center. I just think that where the focus of the council is with future monies is outside of what we're doing through Parks and Rec is towards sustaining a community pool system here.
Scott?
Yeah, I don't disagree with your sentiment, Don, in regards to the aquatic center, but I feel we chose the option of more evil, which is maintain it forever, which I know is going to cost us likely more money than it's going to cost Richard and his generosity. I also understand that we never want him to feel that, we don't support him and we're not there. And I think that each one of us has taken a role in supporting him and his ventures in one way, shape, or form. But in regards to the LAX money for litigation, if money was growing on trees and we had more of it than I knew what to do with, I'd say, yes, let's go and let's fight them. But I feel like we're fighting them to what end? And Mr. King's going to tell me to stop talking.
Yeah, I would really caution the council to not, I don't think you want to show your hand, if I can say.
I hear what you're saying.
I would just be careful with, there's, litigation that might be coming in the future that we just don't know what the council's direction will be. So just want to put that out there. Thank you.
I just want to restate, this is past historical. When we looked at this very carefully, Don, with LAMP and our chances of winning with our subject matter experts in CEQA and LAX, and we thought we chose the reasonable, financially responsible path because our odds on that particular case, many will be different, but on that particular case, our basis for an argument was very limited. I have a procedural thought, because it's 5:34, and I'm sure everybody's anxious to wrap up. If we took time to seriously contemplate this as a council individually away from chambers and came back a couple weeks, how would that significantly affect your process from a timing standpoint?
No, so I do have timeline here. So September 4th, come back and review a comprehensive review of the proposed operating budget. So this would be for all funds. And we can continue this discussion then, and then bring back the adoption of the budget on September 18th.
Okay, so September 4th, we can, as a council, come back with our concerns about any individual line items, further questions we might have, whittle it down then. I would hate to rush the decision tonight because it's getting late in the
Absolutely.
day.
Yeah, there's still sufficient time. But on September 4th, we would have to have direction. And if there's not, maybe just make a decision of holding it in reserves or allocating it towards one of these other buckets.
Okay.
Is it against procedure, or is it wrong if you emailed us this spreadsheet, not as a PDF, but as a spreadsheet? Because you do have a column here, action approved, yes or no. And we could go down, and then you can, Greg's going to be able to review this quickly and say, okay, well, all of you guys are agreeing on this. These are the couple items that you're not agreeing on. Let's talk about those.
Yes.
You're talking about sharing your comments back with me.
Yes. Yes.
So I believe that can be done during the one-on-one meetings, Mr. King, with, no?
If Greg's the only one that knows it, it's not like I'm sending that spreadsheet back to Drew, Carol, Chris, and Dawn.
As long as he doesn't respond to any of the emails.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Putting it on the spreadsheet, then submitting it back to Greg. I think those deliberations you want to do in public.
How about just send it to us and we don't send it back to Greg? It's just
Yeah.
that we have it available with
Yeah,
us,
yeah, you can
filled
fill it
out
out.
in
I think-
advance. So it'll total everything for us, do the calculations dynamically.
Yes, and then it would be discussed in the open public
Yeah.
meeting on September 4th.
I think what we're concerned about is having private decisions being made in private.
Yeah, I get
So
that.
it's perfectly fine to get the spreadsheet, fill it out yourself, and then bring it back to an open session, discuss it publicly.
Okay.
Okay. Chris is already done with that.
He's turning in his homework.
Bonus points for Chris. Hey man, I got my calculations too on paper. But all right, that's anything else to cover then, Greg or Joe, before we? Suppose we should go back to public comments, right?
Just thank council for their time and to the department heads and Joe for their hard work on this. And
Yeah, thanks
we're getting,
to staff.
We're getting closer.
Staff did all the heavy lifting. Thank you all for all the work. I know there's a lot of analysis that goes into this, any budget process, so thank you for your time. And we need to go back to public communications, right? Public communications, now is the time and place. Seeing none, close that. All right, we are adjourned at 5:37 p.m.